Okay, now we're back. So yes, we'll be doing a DGG Fight Night in just a moment. How are you, Toyota? Haven't seen you in a little bit.
I'm pretty good, man. I'm excited to be back at it.
All right. So who are our judge for this night and our first two contestants?
Our judges are the same as always. We are currently waiting for Free, the moderator,
Yeah.
and he and Live Free are running a little bit late on this one. But we have today Uni versus J-Boz. Uni says that protesting is completely ineffective and should not be done in the modern day, and J-Boz is going to talk to him about that. And then we have Octavian versus Live Free on the legalization status of the private sale of organs.
Okay. All right. So we'll get started. Hopefully, Free will be here soon. I'll go from there. Thank you, F Tachyon, for being so kind as to resub for 4 months. Really helpful. Thank you. Says I like eating nachos. I'm very happy for you. I'm so ecstatic. But okay, I'm gonna bring in the other two, and we'll go from there.
All right.
Hello all. Hey, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
All right, thanks. Thanks so much. Yeah. Do they each have cameras?
I think
I
you'll
do not.
recognize this.
Okay.
Hello, everybody.
Oh my god.
Thank you for the 400 bits, Ambrick.
Ooh.
Awfully kind of you. Helps us out a ton. We're level 1 hype train, 48% down, 52% left. If we get to a level 2 hype train, it'll be a great help. That's how we power the channel, is with kind tippers like you. So thank you for the bits. Please sub to the channel, give bits or give subs. Power this hype train. Let's see if we get to level 2 hype train. If you have Amazon Prime, just Prime Gaming, use that 1 free sub per month. Here, it would honestly be a huge help to the community. Thank you. Okay, so we'll get started. So that's weird. Hey, which one of you wants to go first?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
I
it looks
guess
like
I
we're
can
going to be
start.
moderating this one.
Alright, cool. J-Wells, if you don't mind, I can, do a bit of a brief opening statement.
Yeah, for sure.
So I guess the essence of today's discussion is going to be about the ethical nature of protesting and its efficacy in the political sense. So I will be arguing that in 2022, large protests that interrupt the public sphere are no longer viable politically or ethically. I think if you really care about the issues that you're going to be protesting about, there are more effective ways for you to achieve said goal, right? So if we look, for example, at the Black Lives Matter movement, the approval rating of the Black Lives Matter movement kind of went with the opposite of the popularity of the protest. The more people that protested the movement, the more people pushed back on it. And it seems like the less effective it was able to be. I think if you really care about, enriching the lives of Black people and making sure that you get meaningful police reform, we have a democracy that allows people to actually engage and vote as opposed to disrupt the lives of other people. I think the way that you should look at it is, it's like when you're walking through a mall, right? And you have someone that tries to shove something in your face, being like, hey, join my gym, or this is a good cell phone membership, or do you want to donate $1 to cancer? Most of the time, you're actually pushing people away from the cause that you care about, as opposed to bringing people into them. Especially after COVID and during the pandemic, we saw people have very much a dislike of large gatherings, especially when those lockdowns were going on. For example, in Australia, the Black Lives Matter movement died on arrival because they had large protests during the COVID lockdowns, and they got fucking slammed by everybody because they were saying, well, hang on a second, if you really care about Black lives, why are you protesting in a way that could endanger people? And people just don't like to have things pushed in their face. It's just not viable. It doesn't work. That's the main gist of it. It's not viable. People don't actually gain positive people don't gain a positive opinion of topics when they're protested en masse. And if you really care about getting people to care about your issue, then protesting and making people not like it anymore doesn't actually help your cause. That's it.
So, I fundamentally disagree with pretty much every aspect of that assertion. I think protesting and political demonstrations are fundamental aspects of democracy. I think that there's historical and even modern precedent that shows it's an effective way to communicate message or unrest in regards to either policy or other problems that are presiding over people who feel the need to demonstrate in the ways that they have. You mentioned Black Lives Matter being unsuccessful, but prior to the protests, I mean, Black Lives Matter now is a term that's like pretty much on the front door of like every like lefty, right? It's like a home brand now. It's like a household name. I think that effect is incredibly important. I think it transcends these sort of like short-term minutia of political pundits coming out and giving their spiels about, oh, they're doing this and that and they're awful because of this and that. The messaging, I think,
Is your mic rubbing against something?
Oh, sorry, give me a second. This will sound better. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that the message itself has been really effective. I think Black Lives Matter is an example of like a modern political movement that, if anything else, has raised awareness of the disproportional treatment that Black people face in America, and honestly, really any minority. So I think it should be protected. I think that protesting and demonstration should always be something that is like fundamental as a foundation of like our government in the way that we make these things known, like make issues known and bring awareness to these causes.
Sure. So I have a few problems with what you've said so far. So I don't know why you're like looping protest and demonstration in like a compound sentence as if these things are the same, right? A protest is something that is intentionally going out of its way to disturb the public, right? It's not a protest if it's not disturbing someone, or if it's not getting in the way, or if it's not, disrupting, right? You can have a demonstration that is not disruptive. My point is entirely based on the disruption that protests cause and how that disruption doesn't actually serve the goals that people want, right? So you're talking about how BLM is a household name, but when it comes to politics, and this sort of all publicity is good publicity is true in like marketing and trying to make money because you want to get brand awareness. But in politics, it kind of works the total opposite of that, where if you've got like a massively well-known idea, if it's well-known, but people fucking hate it, that really doesn't go towards your own benefit. I mean, we've seen how the Democratic Party has totally flipped on its police reform narrative, where it was popular, but then these huge protests happened that then led to riots, and it totally fucked the whole public nature of it. People knew a lot more about the protests because they were so big, but what did they know about them? They knew that they caused damage. They knew that a lot of them weren't actually based in the greatest of information. Jacob Blake is the perfect example of this. And they knew that the people that were supporting the protest were okay with most of the things that were going on there, saying that, okay, I know that there's a lot of really bad stuff happening at these protests, but, we got to spread our message. We got to get the name out there. We got to get the movement. It's got to become more popular. It became more popular, but it became like it became like the bread and butter of the right to point out all these protests and be like, your cities are getting destroyed and your normal way of life is being disrupted.
Yeah, oh, sorry.
Do you... Yeah, thank you. So, do you agree with my understanding of protest, where it's like a protest necessarily disrupts the public?
So I'm not specifically sure on like definitions here.
We can agree on one though, right? Like
we can
agree that
we can move forward with this definition though. That's fine.
Okay, cool. So yeah, these protests that disrupt the public, they don't benefit the people that are being disrupted. Have you ever been like stopped by like a climate activist and afterwards you're like, yeah, look, I really know that this person, trapped me on the fucking highway and an ambulance wasn't able to get through. But like, gee, that's a great message, right?
I mean, so what's the barometer of public disruption here? I think even with peaceful demonstrations, there's still disruption. You have a group of people in an open space, most likely a public space. That's a disruption. So I think like a disruption is sort of the point of these protests. I don't necessarily agree with like blocking highways or access to like critical, care like ambulances, fire trucks, police vehicles.
Well, why
But
not? Why do you think that's a bad thing?
I think it's a bad thing because it puts people in danger, right? So, like I said, I think like there are certain lines where there's acceptable and unacceptable protesting, but I still think like protesting in general is really fucking important. There's for every like bad thing BLM did, there's numerous examples of these huge crowds of people all gathered and doing these marches in multiple cities across the United States. It was huge turnout. So I think that despite like the media may not have been fixated on the sheer like volume of people who came out for BLM, I think like just as a society we came to recognize like there's clearly a reason why these people are marching and presenting this message.
Yeah, actually the huge problem about mass protests is there is no clear message. No one can tell you the clear message that came out of BLM other than police equal bad, right? Because we've seen a lot of the times where, okay, we shouldn't kill unarmed black men, right? But most people agree with that before the BLM movement. That wasn't some like revolutionary idea that came as a result of these protests.
I mean, we had a chronic problem in the United States with the police like misappropriating force, specifically
and
against people of color.
and
So,
if you showed someone footage of an unarmed black man being literally killed, who had their back turned to the police, or was an obvious case of police misconduct, people weren't a fan of that before BLM. But we don't have to get too caught on the BLM thing, right? Because it is a good example of some things where it's like, look, there's a huge protest that have been going on, and it led to ultimately pretty negative publicity, because once it became such a household name, you could attach yourself to that movement and allow very negative things to come as a result. I think we all know that like the BLM organization is like corrupt as fuck. I mean, that's pretty much been proven at this point.
yeah, I think, and this is actually something I've mentioned earlier today. I was having a discussion. I think the lack of central leadership that's clearly established, along with a clear message, is one of the issues that modern protesting comes down to. I think when people are self-organizing on such a scale, it's probably just easier not to have like a central authority figure directing and making decisions. I know about the leadership of BLM. I think what they have done in terms of embezzlement is disgusting. I also don't think like they sent around, some kind of vote where you chose who the leader of BLM was. Co-opting is a huge problem with modern protesting, and I think if anything, it should sort of promote like a centralized leadership figures that have been prevalent in the past with protests, to sort of like become a thing again, right? But of course, no political representative will ever do something like that. And in the past, we've been fortunate to have these figures come out, and we should use them again. But I think I still think like the BLM was overall effective in its messaging. I think the disruption within like the overall conversation has really like had an effect on the way people view like the treatment of minorities by authority figures like the police. So I don't know. I mean, we can both agree like BLM probably overall a net good.
I totally disagree with that when we look at what BLM enabled, right? BLM itself, probably, if you're being really reductionist, you can be like, you know, I think a lot of people that looked at the surface level of BLM probably came out of it with a good understanding of like, wow, there are some issues here that are a lot worse than I thought they were. That's fine, right? But if we look at the fucking protests that happened after BLM that weren't even like necessarily related, like if we look at the Freedom Convoy, right, or the huge surge in right-wing protests, this is directly as a result of BLM making protesting cool again, right?
Yeah, that's actually just insanity. So I don't know where you get this idea
The anti-vaxxer movement, right, has been totally fucking enabled by the huge amount of coverage that the BLM protests got and other protests got. We can talk about whether or not protests that we agree with are something that we should, you know, be okay with, blah, blah, blah. But that's the easy topic. What we actually have to talk about is the protests that we disagree with that actually lead to a lot more negative consequences in the world. If we're allowing massive anti-vaxxer protests, which have been going across like pretty much every English-speaking country, every European country that did vaccine mandates and a lot of lockdown measures, they had a massive amount of protests that, because I guess everyone's super cucked and they're like, yeah, protests are awesome. Well, these protests, a lot of them were actually enabled and allowed by the media coverage that BLM protests got.
Yeah, I don't think that's true. The Tea Party has been like a grassroots conservative movement since. Oh, sorry, hold on a second. The Tea Party is only one example of like a grassroots conservative movement that propped up well before BLM. I think conservative
the Tea
protesting.
Party don't protest the anti. Like the Tea Party are not who I'm talking about, right? That's like
Yeah, I'm using this as an example. Like, so if we're looking at like right wing protesting, if we're kind of like consolidating it into like a timeline, you know, it's not like what I'm saying is like the anti-vax protests, the convoy, those things aren't exactly like atypical. There's been demonstrations by right wing groups for a while.
Again, you're doing the demonstration thing, right? That
the
is different,
demonstration
okay?
protesting, you know, that's what I'm not.
The Tea Party didn't like have protests that totally disrupted all of fucking society for like a year, right? What the Tea Party did was they held, you know, I think they did some marches, but most of the time they held rallies, right? I'm in favor of you holding like a political rally where if people want to show up, go ahead, show up, but they're not like really interfering with the lives of other people. Whereas we saw BLM protesters going to like a publicly elected officials' houses and, you know, intimidating them to try and get them to agree with them. And then we also saw in the anti-vax protests, we saw a lot of like somewhat credible threats of violence that we just didn't see any of this shit in any of the Tea Party protests. It just wasn't the same thing.
The Tea Party was one of the most effective like grassroots movements in conservative history. It reshaped the face of the Conservative Party and their elected officials. It was incredibly effective. It actually has like a direct, tangible, like we're still dealing with these representatives today. These people who came in, and they still come in under the same like umbrella of like far right ridiculousness, right? Like this is
past performance is not a reliable indicator of future performance here, J-Boz. While I can concede totally that the Tea Party did invasive protests, did huge rallies that fucked up all of society and it got them benefits, but this is an entirely different political climate that exists in 2022 versus like the early 2010s when the Tea Party were big, right? Like there's different things now. There's different issues.
Yeah, so
there's different people that are involved in these issues.
We should also mention, if we talk about the Canadian trucker convoy protests, despite what you may feel about that message, they were very effective. They were incredibly effective protests.
What effects?
They had multiple provinces of Canada. I may be using the wrong term. A lot of them rescinded their like COVID restrictions. I don't think the border policy changed, but there was like a lot of local governments that buckled, just hoping to placate them. If they had held out longer, there probably would have been like fundamental change. But at that point, you know, the Canadian government decided to like actually take action against them. So
I mean, this is like a non-source debate. So you're making a claim that the freedom trucker protests in Canada the government actually conceded to their demands. Is that what the point that you're trying to make?
Some of the local governments, like I can't name the specific ones. Somebody would have to look it up.
But none of those
But
mandates were
they
even local.
and again, I don't know like my geography or of Canada, but it's broken up into like provinces, and they had like, I don't know, I'm just gonna name like Ontario, for example, dropped all of their like COVID restriction stuff.
Well, the protests weren't in Ontario, right?
Well, I'm just
Like,
using an example because I don't remember the exact names. So
well,
we can move on from this point.
no. We should stay on
if
this
you
point
want.
because I think it actually perfectly demonstrates my whole point that what happened as a result of the Canadian protests was a lot of people had a really shit month, right? Because they had all these fucking truckers that were in there honking the horn constantly. I think a lot of these people didn't even end up going to jail because the government was so desperate to get rid of them and were so afraid of being seen as authoritarian. And they didn't even achieve their fucking goals. I think one of the main things was that the federal government and Trudeau would have looked really bad to concede to all these truckers and would have sent a really bad precedent. And if these protests were effective, that would be a bad thing for democracy. The Canadian protesters represented a small minority of the opinion in Canada. So allowing people to just, because they don't have anything better to do, to just park their fucking cars on the roads and like totally subvert democracy, it's fucked up. In a situation where we're able to go to the polls, we are literally entitled to choose our elected representatives, to then take to the fucking street because your opinion is the minority opinion, fuck over everyone else's day that's actually trying to build society, and then subvert democracy by intimidating the politicians. This is like literally the antithesis of how democracy is supposed to work. In a system where we're not allowed to choose our leaders, who then choose our laws, I'd be all for democracy. I'd be for a fucking revolution at that point, right? However, that's not the system, right?
This whole like grandstandy ideal would be great if we lived in, and in my opinion, in America, I think engaging in democracy as like a common citizen is almost a privilege at this point. And for certain scenarios, it can be. Like, we're not in a perfect democracy. We don't have perfect representation. We have a massive representation issue. We have these pervasive systemic things like gerrymandering, right? We have like voter districts being cut up all the time. We have local governments that are just like horrifically corrupt and slanted, rigging the system for their own benefit. I mean, there is absolutely a scenario, even like under the democracies we're utilizing now, which you're leaning on to prove your point. Like they're huge, they're massively flawed. There's and I'm not going to get into like voter suppression or like the multiple strategies they use to like suppress the minority votes, to suppress like poor votes, to suppress districts that don't lean in their favor. So it's a huge problem.
So then what? So I guess if you're saying that democracy doesn't work properly, so we should allow people to protest to subvert democracy. That's the point that you're trying to make here.
No, I think protesting is a democratic action. I think it's an example of democracy. I think it's when you are existing in a scenario where you're not being represented, or the authority governing you is infringing upon you, and I believe that there should always be a place for that. Like, even if, for example, like the cause is wrong, even if it's a bad like thing, I think like even and you mentioned before with the truckers in Canada, a minority opinion. I mean, like, honestly, did we have to like listen to minority issues? Like, and even if they're wrong or based on like ridiculous like anti-vax sentiments, like conspiracy sentiments, I'd much rather have to deal with a trucker convoy than not have the ability to protest. Right?
Yeah. Well, that's clear that you don't know that much about the fucking protest. Then if you're saying like, oh, we should just like allow this thing to happen. Fuck no. The feds and state police should totally be able to go in and break all that shit up the second it starts becoming disruptive to the public, right? When you live in a system that is such a fucking fragile economic state as the one that we live in now, just giving like a pass to everyone to be able to go around and fuck that shit up could lead to some extremely dire consequences. I don't think we should go as far as like the Chinese Communist Party, where they will like unironically just like put you in jail for your whole life for protesting. But I do think that we're too far libertarian on this issue in most of the Western societies, where it's like free speech at this point is no longer serving what it could have been serving in the past, because the free speech that people are trying to use to argue for protest, well, it's free speech to impede someone else's movement. Your protest that is then changing laws without democracy, that's actually going against someone else's free speech and their ability to vote for an elected representative. Like, would you be okay with a protest happening that has like 25% approval rating, but they stand outside every elected official's house fucking banging drums for 24 hours a day, and then that changes the law? Like, would you be okay with that?
I mean, you're not telling me what the protests would be based on. I mean, they've done this before. Like, it's not always particularly effective. There are certain laws that prevent you from standing there in the street and banging drums all night. I mean, you know, if you have
Wait, why
like,
should there
if
be
you have
one?
if you have like 5,000 people in a fucking street in front of a representative's house, you have a fucking problem, right? If your electorate is banging on your door, you have a fucking issue, dude, and that
But
needs
it's
to
not
be
your
addressed.
electorate. It's a minority in the electorate who don't
That
have
is your
anything better to
electorate.
do.
What do you mean? A minority, just because they're a minority doesn't mean they're not a fucking electorate. That's
Yeah, a
the
minority
United
opinion.
States was built to allow minority representation to have an effect, a tangible effect on its government processes. And while
And I think you
and
can
while
point to that
to
causing
some-
a fuck ton of issues in that
yeah,
system,
yeah,
right?
yes, and I would agree there's absolutely potentially problems with this, but like when you're dealing with minority issues, I mean, I'm going to use an example like the Stonewall Riots. The riots that happened in the 1960s that essentially like shaped the way that LGBT rights movements happened. During that time period, it was illegal to be gay. During that time period, gay people, they went to gay bars that were ran by the fucking mafia because the mafia paid off cops to leave them alone. And then the cops eventually just started to like ignore like the bribes and move in and just start like attacking these people, like assaulting them for
We're
doing
talking about
nothing.
we're talking about like the 60s right now. While I can totally agree that in the past, some large scale demonstrations of not only like peaceful protesting, but violent protesting has been effective, we need to talk about what's going to be useful for the future, right?
Yeah, but
In
the effectiveness argument that you've given is BLM is ineffective because it allowed the right to rise up, or
No,
or it
not
fueled
just
and
that.
inflamed these protests.
It
right?
also it alienated a fuck ton of people on the left as well, right? The idea that people today, especially in Western society, where people are such fucking babies now because they've been so coddled, people don't want their lives massively disrupted. It pushes people against their fucking ideology. I can agree that sometimes protests are going to be effective, but the issues faced by today's people are so fundamentally different to the people that are to the issues faced by people in like the 70s. Why, if you've got two fundamentally different problems?
I didn't know the police like raiding gay bars and assaulting gay people was a lot different than the way that they disproportionately target like minority people of color on like
So,
a regular basis
if
in
you
modern fucking America, dude.
if you
Like,
can't see the difference between gay people being systematically oppressed versus black people being systemically oppressed, then that is going to lead to a fuck ton of issues in your political ideology. You cannot have two entirely different issues and then try and use the same tool to fix them. When black people weren't able to sit next to white people on the bus, and that is something that could lead to their death or imprisonment.
do you know
you're
what
gonna
made that better, dude? Protesting.
wait, J-Boz, that's my whole point. Is when you have black people and white people not being able to sit next to each other on a bus, that is going to need a very different solution to, well, we have over-policed black communities because of intergenerational trauma and like massive failure of wealth redistribution, right? The way that you fix issues from the 70s are so different to the way that you fix issues in 2022. I don't know why you would be so lazy as to try and like replicate what people did in the past for whole different issues.
I don't think it's lazy to be fed up with mistreatment. What are you talking about?
No, that's not the lazy
is
part.
there
The
is there a
lazy part-
specific like mechanism that we now need to utilize in like modern politics other from like protesting like now Like, what is supposed to be the alternative? What is the way that
That's
you
a good
bring
question.
a voice to people who have zero representation, who
So,
are
right.
at least their representatives are failing to represent them?
Okay, so if you're talking about like how do we fix an elective representative who's not representing the majority of their constituents?
I said, what about the minority?
We live in a democracy, my friend. Ultimately, it is always going to be the responsibility of the majority to act in the best interest of minorities in some cases. But we
Oh,
can't
that's
just
really good news then. You know what?
so
Maybe we're fine. The white people
wait.
will save us all.
Our legal system absolutely allows for this, and so does our political system. If you look at people that are unable to vote, some of our policies are specifically directed towards helping them. For example, if we look at how much funding goes into education, well, why would we fund education if children are a minority population who can't even legally vote? It's almost like a majority representation can look out in the best interest of people that aren't able to voice themselves politically.
Yeah, you chose probably one of the worst examples of an area where, because children don't have any kind of real representation, education is one of like the least supported like aspects of America. I mean, teachers are having
how
like,
much money goes into education each year in the United States?
oh, I don't know.
Yeah, so it's billions and billions and billions of dollars, right?
Yeah, it's not enough.
Yeah, you can say it's not enough, but even the fact that we can show tangibly that people who can't effectively argue for themselves politically can still be the beneficiary of politics goes against this idea that we have to allow the minority to have a stranglehold over the majority. The whole point of democracy is trusting that each man is fucking born equal, and from there we can decide that each person should have some equal say. We can't just like allow our majority powers to be like stranglehold by the minority. It doesn't work.
So we have to hope that the majority voter base will somehow decide not to be self-interested and vote upon policies that either don't affect them or they're unaware of.
This
We have to
happens
hope.
all the time.
How is the majority supposed to even know that there's a problem then if
So
there's no protesting
protesting,
allowed?
good question, right? Protesting is not the only way to spread a message. One is advertising, right? Now that does require an investment, right? But that's just like how fucking life works. All things cost money, and you can raise money and buy advertising. That's one thing that we've absolutely seen is effective political advertising leads to a lot more fucking votes than like effective political protesting, because we can I mean, you can laugh, but it's just true. Why do you think people spend billions and billions of dollars in advertising?
I think the video of George Floyd being suffocated to death was all the advertising they needed, and it pushed people out into the fucking streets.
And,
Like,
no, there was no tangible benefit. Like, if you're trying to say that George Floyd's death resulted in like a net positive, I guess you could say that. I would disagree.
I'm
right?
not saying his death led to a net positive. I'm saying that the reaction to his death spurred a movement that's primary message, I think, is something that's going to transcend these, like, you know, pundit talking points, right? Like this little bullshit, it's, none of them are vaccinated. We're in lockdown, but they're protesting. It's like, dude. And then like a month later, people like go out in droves to protest vaccinations. Like, it's just like fucking bullshit. And I'm not worried about these like little minor minutia. Like, you say that it like drives people away from the left. I mean, I don't know about that. We still had like a lot of turnout for Biden. I mean, a massive amount of turnout for Biden.
Yeah, Biden is not okay. There was a massive turnout for Biden. While I agree his approval ratings aren't great at the moment though, but I think one of the main things that we saw the Democratic Party do was like try and hardcore distance itself from the far left. But you can probably put that more on Republicans just being extremely politically effective.
Do you consider BLM to be the far left?
Absolutely. That's not a hot take at all. They're like some of the key aspects of BLM are that it is rooted in far left causes, right? I would consider myself a pretty far left person. So I think it's pretty obvious that people that are engaging in direct action, that are protesting in the attempt to like cause damage to property to demonstrate. Like, yeah, a BLM was totally fucking hijacked by far left protesters and far left movements. It's like undeniable.
So co-opting, so by your own admission, then co-opting of a protest by far left groups is bad.
Yeah, obviously it's bad.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I'm just saying, in 10 years from now, like, you know, when policy is being determined and we're thinking about like the important things that representatives are like concerned with, like people are concerned with the way that the police are able to treat people and get away with. I mean, you know, a lot of these protests, when they occurred, it was at a local level, right? So these are direct responses to local police, local police departments, local governments, and I mean, I don't know if you
Didn't
understand.
A bunch of police reform, like local, sorry to interrupt you, but didn't like a bunch of like local policies like fail when it came to police reform in places like Minnesota or whatever? Like didn't a lot of these actually fail?
So like the thing, like the policy reform, what really needed to happen, I think what BLM was kind of exposing is that policy wasn't really the issue is a cultural problem within police departments, right? This is an issue with the way that they behave, their views. I mean, there's I'm not sure how familiar you are with like American police departments. There are absolutely some the LAPD that are just racist like gangs, right? Like I don't think anybody would disagree, and it's very, very difficult. How are you going to enact policy to tell cops not to be racist, right? There's a point where
one thing you need to do is they need to this is a great BLM is such a good example of everything I'm trying to talk about, because it was such a massive movement that could have been used for good. However, the main message that came out of BLM was defund the police, which is the fucking stupidest idea ever in trying to fix the police, right? Defunding the police.
I remember that messaging.
Giving the police less resources and then expecting them to somehow be more efficacious afterwards is like the best example of why the BLM movement and the BLM protests ultimately led to no good conclusions. You cannot expect your police department to be exponentially better after massively cutting its fucking resources. And the defund the police message was actually extremely unpopular in the communities that probably needed it the most. Like Biden, the fucking president of the US, came out and stood at the fucking State of the Union and said, we need to fund our police, and got a standing ovation from everyone in the fucking room and everyone at home.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're talking about like co-opting and messaging and the lack of central leadership. I didn't really like that messaging. I think most people summarize that it was like pretty bad.
It was the main thing that came out of it, right?
I don't necessarily. I mean, I still think the main thing that came out of it was an awareness that Black lives are disproportionately mistreated by the police in comparison to white lives. And I think that message got across to a lot of people. Although, you know, like I think it's there's a reason why
policies that would all the policies that were like shown up afterwards are like the BLM movement policies inspired by it all were attempting to like defund the police, and that's what ended up failing.
Yeah, so there were policies I know of. I mean, there was some and off the top of my head I recall like some financing being taken away from like the LAPD and put towards like community policing efforts. So I guess it was like they're trying to like, I don't know, create something else as a solution. But I think the point is that they did listen, right? And of course it's California and it's like gigalib, but still, you know, there was like some effects. Like, do we need? And I don't want to get into like the argument of like, do the police require all this funding, stuff like that. I feel like it's just kind of
yes, they absolutely do. If you want to look at the best police departments in the world, you look at the ones that are the best funded, that spend the most amount of money on training and have the most amount of ability to like deal with problems on the inside. This is a bit of a tangent, but I'm just gonna say it because fuck, I've been wanting to say this to people for a really long time. the biggest problem with US policing is how decentralized it is that you have county police, is that you have like state police, and that you have like a very small amount of federal police, right? If you want to fix US policing, each fucking state needs its own police force, and you need to literally abolish all of the fucking county police and make it way more centralized. That way there's actual accountability, right? This idea of like decentralizing the police, defund the police, allow for community policing, fucking insane. That's how you get extremely bad corruption. If there's no one to tell the community police officer that they're doing the wrong thing, that's how you get the fucking huge problems that you have in the US. You have like little enclaves of police that are racist as fuck, and because it's so decentralized, they have no commanding officer that can actually do anything about it. Like, the idea of a localized police force is like the antithesis of every good fucking police force in the world.
Yeah, I don't think that's really how policing functions, at least not like, maybe depending on your population density, but when you're in a place as diverse as the United States, having actually a police force that's like familiar and able to regulate itself based on what community it's policing is a good thing. The problem is a lot of police departments don't care about policing people well, or, you know, not being
But then
racist.
the
But
smallest
that's a whole
communities
other
then
issue.
will have the least funding, right? And the smallest communities will have the least funding. So these small communities that are already off the bat at a disadvantage are then going to be dealing with a massively underfunded police force. If you have an underfunded police force, only fucking losers are going to go into it. And then what you have is like country towns in the US that have massive fucking losers working there because the pay is shit, and they just get express authority.
Yeah,
Anyway,
so like
this
I
is
don't want to
totally
live. I don't want to
tangential.
live and die. Yeah, I don't want to live and die on this hill right now. Police funding. I think it's. But I think your point. You made your point that its messaging was like one of the main things that drew people away. And I'm not arguing like with the idea that messages were not filtered through like a centralized leadership, or just like, you know, things get fucked up and co-opted. That happens a lot. I mean, David Koch was like personally financing the Tea Party and their representatives that campaigned. I mean, it's a fucking mess. So, but I still think it's really fucking important to allow this to exist. I'm not even thinking about the modern day. Like, what about into the future? If we want to use it, like the idea of, well, we don't want people to protest anymore, but instead of outlawing protesting, let's like actually make our democracy really representative so people just won't want to protest anymore. That'd be great. But
Well,
there's
remember
just so
what
many
we're talking about when
examples.
it comes to protests, right? Because you can, under my system, where like publicly intrusive protests, for example, like shutting down roads or causing like mass fucking disruption, that is the thing that would be illegal under my system. However, allowing for like political demonstrations where people have an organized position where they tell the police, hey, we're going to come here, we're not going to march anywhere, we're just going to like have our spot on the grass, and we're going to hold some signs, and we are going to have a rally, that's fine. It's the second that you start breaching and you start going into other people's space, that is when the protesting becomes an issue. Not just because it's fucking annoying, but because the second that you start picketing in someone else's face, that is when it starts to become politically ineffective. And if it's politically ineffective and you're someone who cares about that issue, and it's a politically ineffective way to deal with that issue, now it's fucking morally ineffective.
I think you need to draw. You need
Oh,
to draw
we're
too many
gonna
barriers.
wrap up soon. But
Yeah,
we're gonna
you
have
need to.
the hold on. We are also gonna have the judges that they want to ask a few questions, so we'll allow them to do that as well. But you
Cool,
can
go for
finish
it.
your
Yeah,
thought.
I just want to drop a little response. So, I think you need to like essentially appropriate your own definition of protesting in order to make this take or this perspective like function whatsoever. I think it's kind of weak. I think like delineating like, oh, this type of protest is bad, but this type of protest is good. I mean, if you want to create laws that will say, well, you can't, you know, block off roads, that's a whole thing. But like the idea that, I don't know, I feel like you haven't proven your points, David. Yeah, I don't
Okay.
think you've given enough substance.
Sure. So
Okay.
I guess if we're doing like a last statement, go ahead, bro.
Well, let's do the questions first. So,
Cool.
when judge asked Uni. Ask you for what examples would you consider to be the most successful protests in the U.S.?
The most successful protest in the US would be something like the Million Man March, or generally speaking, what ended up happening under like the civil rights movement with like MLK and like as the leader of it. Those are like the most politically effective ones, and I will always concede that, right? However, the more extreme parts of those protests were the ones that were the least effective parts of it.
Yep. And to Jay, what do you think of the least successful protests?
The least successful protests? I mean, I guess that depends.
Clan rallies, like
It's like Klan rallies, yeah. Like I mean, like anti-vax protests,
Westboro
the
Baptist Church.
Nazi, yeah, the Nazi marches, the Baptist Church. Like those are like legally sanctioned protests, but like protesting dead soldiers' funerals is not.
Yeah, I'd be
it's
fine if
not-
you
it's
couldn't
not
do
gonna-
that. Like, you
Yeah,
should totally be able to fucking arrest people for doing that. Sorry, I hijacked your question, but you come on, you have to agree with me that like
No,
if you're-
no. I mean, we're on the same page. We know like what the least effective protests are, like what the least effective movements. They're just hate groups, right? It's just spewing hatred and alienating everybody around them.
yeah, like ACAB, that's pretty much spewing hatred, or like fuck the police. Like, yeah, we agree.
I like Rage
Okay.
Against the Machine.
Another question is to Uni. What do you think should be done if something truly unjust happens?
If something is so unjust to the point where it subverts the democracy that you're living in, I feel like I said this earlier, do a fucking revolution. Fuck it. The reason that I'm so against protesting in 2022 is because, at least in the country I'm from, and in the US this is true also, there is a functioning democracy. As much as people try to tell you that, bro, like the democracy doesn't work, like blah blah, all this shit, it's not true. If you're politically effective, you will win. Go ahead, Toya.
So you only advocate for protesting in like the extremes?
Yeah, like if someone is taking away your vote and they're not allowing you to be able to like express yourself in the political system through voting, you should be able to respond, because I feel like that's not only an attack on your fucking liberty, that's an attack on your safety as well. If someone came up to me and said, you are a red furry, and because of your red furriness, you're no longer able to vote, that if I reacted in some form of like violence, that would be self-defense, because you're like removing your ability to be able to actually vote. That's an attack on you and your liberties and your safety.
Can you give an example of an extreme protest done well?
Yeah, sure. So
In recent time.
In recent times, an extreme protest in like a Western civilization, there aren't really that many because of previous protests that happened in the past and previous revolutions and previous like civil wars. Those things have kind of like lacked the ability for any extreme protest to be as necessary. I can't give you an example of a recent protest in a Western civilization that led to some sort of massive enshrinement of rights, especially not like a violent protest.
Okay.
Well, Egypt had a revolution. They have one like every 5 years at this point.
Yeah.
They've overthrown their government a few times. Yeah, that's a whole other bag of worms.
Yeah,
All right.
Arab Spring.
I think if we wanted to, we could do closing statements and then we can get to the voting.
Do you want to go ahead, J-Boz? Oh, actually, should I go? Because
Oh wait, we have one more question. I'm sorry about that.
Good.
As soon as they give us the question, they're typing it out.
Someone in chat said, what about 2014 Ukraine? Good example. Wasn't really a violent protest that was initiated by the people living there. It was actually the government that first responded with violence and like killed a fuck ton of people. So it's not the greatest example, but 2014 in Ukraine is definitely an example of like a revolution that was necessary. But Ukraine ain't the fucking USA.
Okay. So yeah, we're still waiting for that last question. Hopefully we will get that soon. Okay, here it is. If we outlaw disruptive protest, what protection do we have against future overreaches by the government that would justify those protests? And that's the uni.
So I feel like you wouldn't need like a legal protection in that case. At that point, we are justifiably breaking laws. And while the government would be able to arrest you for that, you would be able to get arrested regardless, right? Like if the government has already decided to overreach its power and like stop you from being able to do one thing or the other, they will be able to find a reason to arrest you if they're so intent on like marginalizing this group of people. You are probably going to have a small amount of legal protection, but at that point, the revolution's on anyway. Like if one day the US government just came out and were like, look, all Hispanic and all black people, we don't like the way that you vote because you vote more for the Democrats. We're actually just going to like arrest all of you. But actually first we're just going to like strip away your ability to protest. I feel like you're already legally fucked. And at that point, you just have to hope that you get like majority opinion and like fight back with some sort of force and demonstration. But it's only once the government takes these steps to stop your ability to vote that I think it's okay to react in some sort of like large scale, like extremely disruptive protest, because at that point it's justified. The justification is always going to be a bit hazy and a bit arbitrary. But I think right now we're so far past the gray zone that exists on when it's justified and when it's not, that I'd be comfortable with a lot of protests we're seeing being like, you know what, this protest probably shouldn't fucking be able to happen. We're not at the gray zone yet. Once we get there, we can debate it, but we're so fucking past the line of what's acceptable.
Okay. Jay?
Do you want me to respond to that as well?
Sorry, did you give your last statement? Maybe I missed it. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think protesting is like fundamental. I think it's something that is expressed across the world for a multitude of reasons. I think it's very important, especially within a representative democracy, that we are able to have an avenue of direct action to express our discontent, regardless of what the subject may be. I think there's absolutely like issues that arise when civil unrest, starts, when people are protesting, being disruptive. But I think like the nitpicking and the temporary discomfort, despite the fact like it causes like economic damage, etc. I still think it's an important right to protect. I think that we don't want to see what happens when we suppress protesting. I don't think like the idea of suppressing those rights will have far-reaching consequences throughout any state entity. We don't want cops to pull people from crowds and shove them into vans and have them just vanish, right? Like, I don't want to live in a society like that. I don't think most people do. So, you can't really have your cake and eat it too. When your leadership has such an incredible amount of power over its populace to the point where you're not allowed to like demonstrate or protest, it's a very slippery slope. So I think we should continue to enshrine and protect this. I think it should continue to be a fundamental aspect of our society and just the culture of human beings, like as a whole. I think it's something that's like innate. The way that we present things to authority when they refuse to listen to the official avenues of representation that are in effect.
Okay. So the judges have voted, and I believe it's unanimous, that J Boss won. So J Boss, hooray, congratulations, move on.
Thank you. I think that was a really cool debate, Uni. I think that was pretty cool.
I think the result's a bit of a humegalol because you didn't really make any actual points. But that's life. It is what it is. I didn't get to make a closing statement either, but it is what it is.
Wasn't that before what you just did?
You made your closing statement.
Yeah.
No, I was responding to like a question, but it doesn't matter.
Okay.
That's kind of true.
Okay. Anyway, so do you want to say anything else, Uni?
Yeah, all I'll say is like, in reality, we have seen that protests have led to negative consequences in the real world. Okay? In theory, this idea of being able to express yourself to the detriment of others might actually work, but the future of our political system is not to protest, right? The future is cooperating with people to lead to an actual better world. I don't really want to live in a society that is held hostage by a vocal minority who exert a disproportionate amount of force. It's just that simple. Protests that change laws without people being able to vote for the representatives are anti-democratic. It's that fucking simple. So if you're pro-democracy, you should be anti-protest. It's that easy.
Okay. All right, and then J Boss, do you have a victory lap to take?
I'm okay. I think it was an interesting discussion. I enjoyed it, so I appreciate that, Uni. Thank you.
Okay. So if you have like socials that you guys want to promote.
Yeah, I'm gonna be opening up my Twitter again, so it's at jboz. You might need to follow request me, but you can find me on there, and I'll accept. I need to just cut out more real life stuff, but yeah, that's where I'll be, and I might do streaming soon. Who knows? I like debating, so.
Okay, and then Uni.
If you like to listen to what I was saying, I come on the Prime panels every now and then, so if you tune in, you might see me. But most of the time, I'm either in DGG or the House of Toy server. So thanks for having me, Prime.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. All right.
See you.
Yeah. Have a good one.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
good one, guys.
Take care, guys. All right, so Prime, I'm getting our last contestant in right now. 1 second. He did not have the link to the waiting room.
Okay. Yeah, so we're just waiting for that. Everyone, if you guys could be so kind and give us a moment while we work that out. We will have these two up and running in a second. But yeah, I hope you guys are enjoying the content so far, enjoying what we're putting together. Guys, if you supporting this channel, if you like what we're doing, hit that follow button. You haven't done so yet. If you're new here, hit the follow button. We have discussions like this all the time. Hit that follow button, make sure notifications are on. We do this 7 days a week. Check out our social media here. I should put social in chat. For our social media, we got Twitter where we tweet things out, letting you know what's going on. We got Discord, Heart and Soul This community. Come be a part of our Discord. We'd love to have you there. And we have everything takes place on our Discord. So yeah, and then YouTube, of course, is where you find the VODs. If you've missed anything, check out our VODs, like, comment, subscribe. We'd love to have you there. Consider becoming a YouTube member, is putting us that way. Thank you, Naritas99 for the kind 300 bits. Helps us out quite a bit. Well, quite a bit. Yeah, it helps us out a lot. Thank you so much, Naritas. And if you're also enjoying this content, consider subbing to the channel, gifting bits or gifting subs. When you do, you get our emotes, exclamation for emotes in chat for emotes. You also get ad-free viewing. So if you want to get the whole VOD in full effect, not miss anything, then yes, please consider subbing to the channel. Or if you have Amazon Prime, just Prime Gaming, use that here on this channel, that 1 free sub per month, and allows us power that keep this up and running, to keep us going. But thank you to those who've contributed, like Naritas, who is now our number 2 gifter for this month, since this month just started, and Amber is our number 1. Thank you. And Scrubber AU number 3, and then Centauri Atacama. Centauri Atacama is our number 1 gift for 1 sub. But thank you so much for the people who've been helping. Okay. So are these two?
Yep, we got them in. We have Octavian and Duke, and Duke is going to be arguing against the legal private sale of organs, and Octavian is going to be arguing for it.
Okay. All right. Great.
And to be extra clear, this is going to be a substitution that we had prepared just in the event that someone had to drop out. Live Free is unfortunately dropping out of the tournament for work-related things that they wanted to focus on.
Okay. Hello, Duke. Duke, do you have a camera?
I do not.
Okay. So sure. Which one would you like to go first?
I guess on the positive, I guess I'll go first. Cool with that, dude?
Yeah, go for it.
Sure. You. Oh, okay. Let me just
All
push your
good?
volume. Go ahead.
Oh, do I need to be louder? Sorry about
Just give it a try.
that. By the end of today, 80 people will have died due to organ failure. Of the approximately 127,000 recipients in need of a transplant, only 14,000 will get donated this year, 11% for those keeping track. The shortage of voluntary organ donations has resulted in an emerging black market for organ trade across the organ donation and trade across the world, transplant tourism. Monetary compensation for organs could help boost the supply of organs to help those dying today and dying tomorrow of organ failure to get them the organs that they need and linking those with people who need monetary compensation or help with the ability for the donation of organs. Right now, really, there's only one place in the world that has this type of system, and it's ironically it's Iran. And in Iran right now, most of the time people will fly out just to get this process and like a great market deal for organs. The price is extremely exorbitant. A lot of times people will not able to do this just because of obviously cost of organs being extremely high due to the fact there isn't really a market solution at this point in time. What we're talking about today is a problem with a solution. Surgeries today have mostly solved the problems of success rate of procedures. With market, you'd be able to solve the problem of people dying today for honestly no reason, due to people getting access and getting monetary compensation for these organs. Be able to actually save people's lives every day, especially. And you'd be able to solve a lot of the externalities of, problems with children, problems with other people who shouldn't be able to donate, problems with different processes of getting these organs through regulation of the market, just as you do with other markets, such as legalization of drugs or legalization of other products that we already do today, such as food and stuff like that, where we try to make sure that the process is, safe and healthy for those involved, as well as making sure that the people there are healthy that are doing these processes, right, mentally and physically. Finally, let's just recap, like what I said earlier. 18 people have already died today due to lack of donors in the next couple of hours, right? That's 18 people a day that we can save by adding this marketplace solution and making these safe procedures open to people who would do it for monetary compensation. That's it.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. So I guess I'll put forward 3 big reasons why it would be bad to legalize organ sales. The first one is that it's going to hurt a lot of the public organ donation system. So this already kind of talks about the supply point that Octavian was making. Very few living people are likely to be choosing to sell their organs. So most of the supply is going to come from people who are in deep poverty, who need like immediate cash relief. So most of the organs that are going to be sold are going to be people who are already in deep amounts of poverty. These sorts of people, the ones who are already in resource lacking areas, this means that they're going to have an increased risk of disease. For example, kidneys are an important part of a comprehensive immune system. The people who are most likely to sell it are going to be in situations that they are statistically more likely to be having bad health situations. And I imagine we're going to agree that selling your organ is, in general, going to worsen your health outcomes, possibly worsen your lifespan in some amount. Another big issue is that it would overburden the healthcare system. So again, because the poor are far more likely to be selling their organs, you're going to have an influx of more unhealthy individuals in already poor, resource-lacking areas. So with an overburdened healthcare system for people who are going to be selling it, you're going to be kind of having a repeat issue of the same problems, an increased risk of disease, and a decreased ability to care for the general population as resources are going to be stretched thin. The obvious consequence is that missing an organ can lead to an organ failure, especially kidney failure as a pretty good example. And then the final issue that I think is an important one is that a lot of people don't have all the necessary information around organ donation. So a legalization is going to basically give a government a green light for coercion. So the vast majority of people who sell their organs are going to be poor, and they're not going to be able to meaningfully consent into an organ selling contract. a lot of times the consequences of selling an organ are so far into the future, and because of lower levels of education, it means they may not be meaningfully understanding what exactly they're consenting to, which means the government is legalizing a fundamentally coercive system. I think those would be the main reasons why I'd say it's bad.
So we're good. So I'm just going to say the 4 things I think we get, and then would you agree that if a system solved all 4 of these problems, that it would be necessarily positive? If like all these problems would be solved by a system of market organ donation. So like let's say they solved like all these problems you laid out with the possible system. The system, if it was able to solve all these problems, let's say we were living in a perfect world where we'd be able to do that, we would want to have a system of market organ donation.
I mean, it's kind of hard to engage with the hypothetical like that. If we're solving problems, then it's obviously good. But if we're in such like a amazing system like this in the first place, it's probably unclear why we even need the market in the first place.
Are there any other problems that you think would bring up outside the 4 you named, or are these the only problems you can think of? I'm just gonna make sure before we get into full arguments.
Oh sure. I think one more that could potentially be an issue, because the market is going to incentivize people to first consider the monetary compensation they're going to get for organ donation. This is going to lower the amount of supply of organs that are donated for public health like research initiatives that would be run by like the HRSA. So you have a lower chance of being able to use organ donation for scientific and medical research. Ultimately, the ideal world is actually probably one where we don't need to have organ donation from other people, but we are making medical and scientific advancements in artificial organs, which the non-monetary donations could go towards funding.
Sure, I would agree that if we were able to, obviously, if we were able to get, the hypothetical world where we solve all organ failures and able to get like synthetic / like biological developments for that, it would obviously be the best system. Right now, we live in the world today where we have about 20 people dying a day from organ failure, right? So we got to find ways to limit that and try to solve the problem today, right? So, all right, so it seems like you have 5 problems with the system. I'm just gonna try and go by that one by one to like try and say how I would deal with those problems. So I'm going to do the first one, which I think is your probably weakest argument, which is probably the fact that people would not have the information or education to do organ donation. Within regulatory systems, people would be able to get information prior to like organ donation / organ sale, right? Today, people are informed massively before giving organs. You still would be able to inform people on the negative repercussions and the different like statistics or different like possible outcomes that would occur through organ donation or organ sale. Even if you're talking about, you wouldn't be able to get them educated, the goal of the system would be to make sure that the regulatory practices and the processes to save people's lives will be done more often, right? So you would be able to, through regulation in the system, be able to solve this problem of education in the populace, right? Even if you are targeting people that, do need the money more than those who don't, right? You still are going to have these abilities to educate them prior to. I mean, it's not like you're going to be like, all right, can I sell my organ? And you're just going to walk in and be able to do it. It's not the system I'm advocating for. And I don't think you think that, right? But we would be able to educate them prior to the operation, right? Number one. And then I would say like probably the second weakest argument is that you're going to be like having people who have organ failure more likely. I would say that's obviously true, that if you donate organs, there's a statistical likelihood that you're going to lead to more organ failure. But again, these like the operation itself, as well as like different, let's say like processes that we have today, organ donors like they are statistically significantly different, but not too much to where we would say the benefit isn't enough to where you wouldn't want to continue donating / having people donate or having people sell their organs, right? We don't stop organ donation today because it's too risky, right? We let people donate organs, we let people sell organs today because we think it's a good process. We want people to give, their kidneys or let people who die like donate their organs as well, and have people, donate their organs today. If we thought there would be more problems with our healthcare system, then it would like be able to net good. We would already stop donation today, right?
Sorry, do you want me to respond now, or?
Yeah, if you could respond to the first one if you wanted to. I waited for a second, but
Yeah, this is the
everyone
debate,
wants
so
to-
you have to talk
Yeah.
afterwards when
Yeah,
the
yeah.
person stops
Okay,
talking.
so yep. So on the first one, can I just get first more clarity on like the regulatory agencies that you think are going to exist to make sure that the system has more informed consent?
Oh yeah, sure. Do you want me to like explain like what the specifics would be, or
Yeah.
So
And if you
specifically-
can also add like why you think that that's like a reasonable or like feasible outcome in like the United States.
So right now, I don't know too much about the donation process, but this is going to probably stretch my knowledge. Today in the United States, you do go to you go to your local doctor to be able to get information from them to talk about the donation process, or like some organization to be able to talk about that. Then you would go to specifically individuals to have like a diagnosis, to make sure they do inspections or checkups on you, to make sure that there wouldn't be negative externalities that would be more negative than the donation itself. Or you do go through these processes to make sure that that's the case, specifically through medical professionals. And then obviously we would try to make sure that the process itself, the surgery and operation, would be clean, or as successful as it is today, right? So I would say the regulatory agencies would probably be agencies already probably like HHS, or maybe why am I forgetting the CDC and stuff like that.
Yep.
Where you would have these or agencies like make sure that hospitals or doctors locally would be able to educate the individuals like on a national scale. So that would be like the agencies level, and I also gave like the local level of how you would get informed.
Okay, it just seems like this is not going to be a system that works out very effectively, because the areas that are most likely to be having an increase in organ donation are going to be the same areas that are underfunded in like both access to hospitals or the quality of care in like a CHC, for example, and very susceptible to like bad legislation from a specific state that isn't going to ensure that like there's enough informed consent involved. And then just to like add on really fast on the first point about informed consent, it's not just do you have the information presented in front of you, but it's also, is someone going to be making a rational decision in their long-term interest? And not just that people have a high chance of making irrational decisions that aren't in their long-term interest, but that if someone has material conditions that make them more desperate, they're going to be even more likely to be making irrational short-term decisions.
Can you explain that? Like, could you expand on that? Like,
sure. If someone is literally in poverty and they are getting, how much would you say someone is going to get? Like, what's your opinion on what the market price is going to be for a kidney, for example?
Probably like around something between like 50 to 100,000, something like that. I don't know the range.
Yeah. So the person who's most likely to be taking this deal is going to be someone who is getting 3 to 10 times the amount of money that they make in a single year. So that's going to be an insane material difference for them that they may not be making the right choice in the long term, thinking to themselves, this money is so far out of what I currently have, even though it's going to be likely gone, in the next 4 or 5 years. And I'm going to adopt a procedure that is going to have consequences for the rest of my life. You're also going to have people who are statistically more likely to be younger, more likely to be making irrational decisions too. So you're going to have an outcome where poor younger people are giving away an organ and then reaping the consequences of organ failure much further down the line, in the timeline that they haven't cared enough about or thought enough about, even if the information's been presented in front of them.
But again, you're now talking. So let's say now that you have this young poor individual going through the processes of going to their local doctor, that gives them information to educate themselves. Obviously, we would make sure they understand. We try to make sure they understand as maximally as possible, right? We try to make sure they be able to understand the most. We then have them go through different checks as we do today with donations to make sure that they are okay to be able to do the donation or do that type of stuff. And then after that, we now have multiple doctors saying yes to this or operation. And we now also have multiple systems in place to make sure that the doctors are doing that properly. And now we have a poor young person getting a lot of money to be able to make sure that they don't die of things such as starvation, living on the streets, stuff like that, to make sure they are able to save themselves from other things such as drug abuse, stuff like that, as we all know is correlated with like being in poverty. Right through
getting like a cash injection of $70,000 isn't going to stop your drug addiction.
It's going to lessen the likelihood of people getting like addicted to drugs, or like lessen the likelihood of you dealing with the effects of starvation, or lessen the likelihood of other things that we know that poor young people deal with. Right? It's going to help those. As you're talking about like all these negative things that are going to occur. First off, we aren't even dealing with the fact that we are saving a life again, of this person, a different life, and we're now also saying that just on this point, right? We now have like either a net neutral or a net positive here for the person, right? You could say that there are long-term negative consequences, right? But again, I'm talking about these procedures and solutions, again, to make sure that those individuals that can donate alive, right, would be able to have checks on them to make sure they don't have these long-term consequences, right? Or have less extremely low likelihood of having these long-term consequences, right? Just because you donate a kidney, at least for those in the audience, if you're looking to do that, doesn't mean you're going to have these long-term consequences if you can make sure that you have the proper education as well as the proper at least system in your body through health benefits, right? That's kind of like what I was saying, right?
Yeah.
We're on this point, right? And I feel like it's just either net neutral or positive. We haven't gone to the fact that we are giving somebody like an organ who needs it, who will die, right? Who is about to die, right? Not going to die in 5 years, but is going to die tomorrow, right? Or die today.
Yeah. So I think there's like a little bit of tension here, because on one hand, you'll go very far to say there's going to be all these checks and information to really make sure someone is aware of all the possible consequences, which the consequence of that should be that we expect the amount of organ donations in terms of supply to be depressed rather significantly, if you think that this is meaningful information that's going to dissuade a lot of people from donating their organs. Or it's going to be the case that we are going to save the statistic that you're talking about. So when you bring up the statistic of the 20 people or whatever the number is that are dying every single day, there's kind of this hidden implication behind it that in the world that you're defending, each and every one of those people is suddenly going to have the supply given to them. And if that's the case, that you're going to have every single one of them saved with the supply this high, then either you're going to have lots of people making really poor decisions, or you're going to magically find a bunch of people who are apparently making a good decision for their long-term health, which seems highly unlikely. So I think the most likely just really fast, sorry. I think the most likely outcome is that you are still far below the amount of organ transplants that you need. So you're only mitigating the issue at best. And what you're getting as a consequence is that people who are most likely to mitigate your issue are producing extremely long-term health consequences for themselves via the risk of organ failure and saving someone's life who is probably going to continue having health consequences down the line. So
again, the risk of organ failure is increased, but not enough to where we would say that like, oh, we shouldn't have people donate today, right? Again, I keep like to say that. Another thing you keep saying that,
but on a voluntary system.
Yeah, and again, a lot of people don't voluntarily give up their organs anyways, right? So again, like a lot of people just don't think that there's like, oh, why would I donate my organ, right? There's no like benefit for myself. A lot of people would actually donate their organs if you have this monetary based system, right? Again, I'm not saying that like, oh, there's going to be 0 people dying of organ failure. That's obviously not what I was saying, right? What I was saying is that we have a problem, right? Let's say like you're trying to solve gun violence or whatever. Your goal shouldn't be to like have like 0 people die to guns. You want to try to make sure that the amount of people that die guns goes down, right? As far as possible as you can get it, right? In the system that I'm trying to implement, a system in which people will be people who die of organ failure or die because they don't get these transplants will be drastically reduced, right? I'm not saying that like, oh, there's going to be 0 people dying. I don't think you think that, right? But what I am trying to say is that we have these people that would benefit from both a monetary injection and would benefit from like other different types of transplants through poor young people, as well as like I lost my train of thought. We would have these people getting these massive monetary injections, which would help them in the short term, as well as getting these people who would need their lives saved through through like their organs, right? And you keep talking about this, the fact that like there's like an extremely high likelihood that they're going to die due to organ failure post operation, right? And it's just not the case.
I'm not saying post operation. I'm saying down the line. So the long term consequences on someone's body.
Like, at least
okay, sure. Yeah, just to be clear, I don't mean someone's dying in a year. I'm talking the long.
If somebody dies in like 70 years, after they do this operation, right?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, there's a middle ground between these two that someone can have. So if you have someone who is young and poor and who is making this decision to take a huge lump sum of cash, more than they've ever had before, to get rid of one of their organs, to go down to one, this person's making a decision with no clear or rational decision or idea of what's happening to them 10, 20 years from now. If there's anything...
We already explained in the system how we are educating them of the outcomes of these operations, right?
But you're not educating. Wait, how are you educating? Like, here's this cost-benefit analysis that you need to make 10 to 20 years down the line when you only have one kidney.
Because we do this all the time, right? When you have an operation or when we try to solve problems, we say, hey, here's the percentage likelihood that this is going to happen with this operation after you're done, right? This is after doing the analysis, here's your risk pool of what's going to happen after this operation. Here's your likely outcomes. We already do educate people when we do medical treatments today. We tell people, hey, here's the likely outcomes if we put you in surgery. Hey, and you know what people do? They go to their doctor and they talk to them and make sure they understand what they talk about, right? This is already how surgeries work today, right? I'm not even changing the system drastically of how it works. All I'm doing is saying, hey, there's more people that can do this.
Well,
right?
you are drastically changing it because none of the situations that you're talking about where you have public health information coming from a doctor involve a compensatory reward for someone taking the action. Anything that you decide if you want chemotherapy or not, the doctor is not having you balance just taking chemotherapy or not taking chemotherapy. The correct analogy more something like, if you take chemotherapy if you take chemotherapy, I'm also going to give you $70,000 in the process. So we don't have an analog that involves rewarding someone with a lump sum of cash for medical decisions that affect the rest of their life. So it's hard to believe that this education immediately transfers over.
Aren't making educated decisions at all, right? You're just saying that there's another externality here that we have to deal with, right? But you were saying earlier that they don't have the education, they don't have the ability to understand. They do, right? That's why they're talking to professionals. That's why they're talking to doctors, right? It's not like I'm saying, we need to give the doctor $100,000 with how we operate drugs today.
A doctor's qualification is not to balance a compensatory reward with the risks that come to their health.
The doctor's degree and the ability to analyze situation is make sure that the patient is safe, right? That's the whole point of having these people with expertise talking to them, making sure that they understand what's going on, making sure that the doctor gives their...
How can the doctor determine the safety from the money they're getting?
The doctor can determine the safety from the operation. It can determine what the likelihood of negative externalities, right? That's how we do donation. That's how we do donorship today.
So
right?
to be clear,
I'm not even talking about all I'm saying is that today we already have a system where donors are given the education to whether or not they should donate, right? And we can expand that system.
They don't have a system that is analogous to what you're advocating for. So let's take it let's go one step at a time here. If a doctor was purely concerned in the donor's health, would the recommendation be to donate or not to donate?
For what it depends.
No, if just purely in the consideration, Bob is considering donating a kidney and the doctor is giving him advice on his health. Is the doctor advising Bob to donate or not donate?
It depends on who Bob is. Bob could have literally no significant difference.
In what case would a donation be good for him?
Because it's not like a positive, right? It would be a net neutral, right?
Okay.
So
almost certainly he would have to say there's some possibility of negatives, right?
There are some positives and negatives of donation. Obviously, I would agree with
that. No. Just from Bob's health considerations, there are no positives that the doctor can point to, correct?
There are, sure, yeah, there are no positives.
So the doctor is absolutely saying, here's all the negative possibilities that happen from you donating. Agreed?
Sure.
Okay, so now we're putting them in so typically in a normal donation process, the person hears all that information and then they're balancing it with I don't know, how much they want to help society or how much they want to help their loved one. That's the balance that they're making. And the doctor really is not giving an input on that level. They're just giving them the risks associated and then they're making the decision themselves. Okay, sure, but they're probably not the most qualified to make that decision anyway. But now it gets even worse. The idea is, I assume you agree, you believe or the idea is that it's not, the doctor is now not just commentating on what are the risks for your health. The doctor is also commentating on what are the risks to your health, balanced with both the public health that you're talking about and the money that they're going to get. So
they don't have to talk about the money at all. Again,
exactly, which makes it worse. If they're not talking about the money at all, and the person who is choosing to engage in the donation is now balancing the decision with the fact that they get $75,000, they're much more likely to make an irrational choice, even if the doctor gives them good advice.
What do you mean they're more likely to make an irrational choice? Let's say like you're saying that like this person is going to have like extremely bad negative outcomes for the donation, right? Again, you could literally have the doctor saying, no, you shouldn't do this at all. Like there's nothing you can do, or like there's like no positive outcome here, right? Again,
you agree that in the system, it's a market, so someone could have a higher than average chance of having bad consequences of donating the organ, and the doctor would tell them that, but because it's a market, they're going to make the choice anyway. And
no, it would be regulated. You could have a system in place to where if you pass a certain point, you could regulate it that way.
Starting to not become a market. I mean, how much are you wanting to regulate?
Market? Like the whole point is to have a regulated market. You're not gonna have a market where you can sell drugs to kids, right? The whole point is to have regulations in which you can have
there's reasonable lines,
right?
But
there's reasonable lines, right? So again, you're saying that like, we should have people who are going to. Okay, do you think that the market system should have people who are immediately going to die after operation? Do you think that's what I'm saying? That those people should donate organs?
No. What I'm saying is
that... So then what you're saying is that my line is so far away from what the acceptable line is. We should just move the line, right? Again, the people that I'm not saying that like everyone should donate or that everything should happen, right? Well, I haven't even gotten to where there are other possible ways of getting people donations, stuff like that, outside this specific group of people that we're talking about, right? So again, these specific group of people that we're talking about, right? We could make it to where there are specific things that you have to do or specific things that you have to be a part of to be able to donate, right? Again, there's another group of people that we aren't even talking about yet, which is the ability to donate people who have already died, or the ability to sell different organs to people who are who are dead, on deathbed, stuff like that, to be able to sell them on the death door, right? So let's say someone is going to die in a few days, right? Right now, you don't have a system in place. You could sell their organs to different organizations, right? It's not possible, right? But in my system, you would be able to do that. You would be able to have people who are on death's door or about to die to be able to sell their organs and be able to increase that market and be able to have supplant it even more instead of this specific group of people, which is poor young people, right? You have all these groups. You have different group of people here, which probably be even more than this group, right? They all is also able to either donate or sell easier or sell their organs to different people who need it, right? Which I think you're thinking that I'm just wanting poor young people to sell their organs, right? Which is not the case.
I'm not saying it's what you want. I'm saying that that's going to be one important consequence of the system.
Yeah. So again, right, what I'm saying is that this is like you could say a negative externality, which I would disagree with, right? But again, this is just one group of individuals, right? This is not the only, I couldn't say the majority or minority, but right now it seems like the majority of people that would sell their organs would be people on death's door, right? Again, I wouldn't say it would be poor young people. I'd say it'd be people on death's door, but who have relatives or people who would be able to benefit from this, who would sell their organs, right? That'd probably it'd probably be like the poor grandma whose kids like isn't able to make it through college, right? That'd probably be the people, in my opinion at least, that would probably sell their organs the most, right?
Sure. To try to put a bow on the part about someone who is young and poor and uneducated, since you think it's probably the minority of the amount, agreeing to this shouldn't make you like lose the topic, right? So do you have an issue with the idea or with the claim that I'm putting forward that people who are young and poor are far more likely to be irrational when faced with a huge amount of money in their face to take a health decision that is objectively worse for them?
They're more likely to be irrational. Yes, I would agree that they're more likely to be irrational. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are irrational, right? Again, if we want to make it to where there are specific stopgaps, make sure that these people don't want to do it, we can have a regulated system, right? Again, I'd like to say, if your problem with the system is that, hey, I think this specific group of people might have negative externalities, okay, we can say, hey, we have regulations to where we can solve it to where people who are only above the age of 25 can donate or some shit like that, right? You can make it to where you could have systems in place to where you can lessen the amount of people that could donate at a specific point in time. You can make it to where these negative externalities you think would make it a worse system could be solved, right?
But you're just saying I can slap tens of thousands of different regulations on to fix all these different issues that you can think of with a market system. No, I agree.
I'm
There's
not
like
saying tens of
reasonable
thousands of different regulations.
lines.
I'm saying there are reasonable lines you can draw to make it to where it's a regulatory system, right? If your problem is that, hey, I think somebody who's under the age of 25
The line
doesn't
you've
have the
gone
ability
is
to
past the
consent to this.
market.
What?
The line you've gone, the line you're drawing is past a market.
No, that's not the case. Just because
You're
children can't buy drugs,
You're heavily regulated.
So hold on. So
But
do you think that because children can't
I
buy
understand
alcoholic
some
products?
regulation. No,
Yeah,
I
so
understand
I
some
literally
regulation.
said there's an age.
exists
I
in the
literally said there's an
market.
age line for the market, and you're like, this is not a market anymore. That's what I'm.
No, that's not what I said.
So,
What I'm saying is,
I said
as
to
the
solve the
problems are
problem.
being. No, you did not even just say that it was about age. You also kind of tried to cover the issue of someone being irrational or being poor, which does not have to be someone who's under 25, for example, because you tried to basket it all together and say, oh, if we have any reason to think that some of these people are making especially poor decisions, then we can regulate for this. So the regulation is just kind of becoming this buzzword to capture anything that you think is bad about the market system.
No.
Now, I agree.
I'm not saying that.
I'm going to agree. I 100% agree with you that we can still have something to look at a market that also has a few reasonable limitations behind it, namely someone needing to be an adult. But if you keep slapping more and more of these regulations on, it's looking less and less like a market, and it looks less and less like you're defending the actual position that you need to defend.
No, so I'm arguing for a market. I said that we should make a line to where people under the age of 25, because you're worried about poor young people, which is a very specific group of demographics, right? If you think that poor people,
you have the same issue for 25 to 35, you're going to have this still a similar issue. They're still going to be fairly young. There's still going to be a decision where they can make, or a position where they make lots of irrational decisions. For example, the average age that someone owns a home is going up. That's going to be past 25 years old. That's going to be a lot of people who are just now starting to have a child. So those kind of issues that are facing them in the short term are going to compound the issues of being irrational. Not just someone who doesn't have their brain that's fully developed yet, but just as someone has regular issues that they're facing because of their material consequences or other consequences that are going to drive them towards being irrational people. People make incredibly irrational decisions for their own health all the time, adults or not.
Yeah,
and then not only do they make irrational decisions that have like small benefits to themselves, like, oh, this burger tastes good. Now they're getting this gigantic reward, $75,000. That's going to greatly increase the amount to which they're.
You want to keep saying that, like, oh, there's this like massive group of people that are going to like die after operation, right? You're saying that there is a chance that there are like individuals in which that increase their likelihood of death by a certain amount, right? But again, by donating organs, again, what I keep saying is that there are these negative externalities. I do agree that there would be like certain groups of individuals that would act irrationally when doing this. I'm not saying that this is going to be a system that solves all problems and that would have like no negative externalities, right? But what I am saying again is that if you have these types of regulations where you can only donate past 25, stuff like that, or you can only donate for, I don't know, there could be other regulations in which we could talk about through the conversation where you could solve these problems, right? You can't solve like every problem. You can mitigate the problems in which the positive outcomes are super positive and the negative outcomes are limited to where specific groups of people, very small in nature, would donate organs that we would say that would have slightly negative outcomes, if not negative outcomes, but would save people's lives, right? That's one of the things I want to keep saying is that my goal is try to save more people's lives, right? I'm not trying to like make it to where the 26-year-old who is going to like have an organ, who is like 50% chance to have an organ failure in 10 years, right? And then 75 in 20 years is going to like donate, right? Or like, I'm not going to try to make a system to where they should be trying to donate, right? My goal is to make it to where the likelihood that they donate, the likelihood that this doctor or surgeon like actually does the operation on them is so low that it's basically not going to happen. Right? That's my goal. Right. That's why, like, I'm saying the education process. I don't think. Yeah. Do you think that somebody who's going to like who has a 70% do you think that somebody who has a 70% chance of dying in 10 years is going to like do that? Or sorry, somebody will do something that's going to kill them as a 70% chance, like, and just going to do it today because they get $70,000? Personally, I don't think so. Unless like they already are on death's door themselves, right? Like unless they're like already 87 or some shit like that, where they're like basically they think they're going to die anyway.
I think that if you lower that number down just a little bit to something like 40 to 50%. That there's going to be a very negative consequence for them, and they're getting money that is 3 to 10 times the amount of money they're making in a single year, and they're also faced with the considerations for the rest of their family, that it's extremely unlikely. doesn't have to even be every single one of them. But if a sizable portion of them are making that choice, it's an irrational choice and it's bad for them. So when you're talking about, we have to evaluate this as, oh, what are the total number of lives that I'm going to save? It's probably a bad metric to be looking at it. The right metric is just overall quality of life. Because, for example, as an extreme example, obviously this is not the average case, but an extreme example, somebody could get an organ transplant and then very shortly after, rejected, or very shortly after have other health problems, and then, they die in a few months. Obviously not the normal case, but the extreme case illustrates that just because their life was saved doesn't mean that we just, go over and put a check mark down and say, a tally mark down and add that to the list of good things that was done. If that came at the cost of severely worsening the quality of life of somebody else, or causing an otherwise healthy person to eventually have a risk of death of their own much earlier than they otherwise would have, then that's a mark against your system that's already heavily distancing itself away from actually being a market.
So I don't know why you keep saying heavily distancing themselves from being a market. I said that people under 25 shouldn't be able to donate. That's literally the regulation.
So that's the only regulation that you want to have?
No, so how much regulation do you think you can have in a system until basically there isn't a market system there?
Yeah, well, right. So we're never going to be able to answer that question, right? That's like
so because you keep saying that I'm moving away from market system when I'm adding a couple regulatory actions that I think I've said 4, maybe 5 regulatory actions that occur within the system, and you're saying that basically you're moving away from market system. I mean, sure, if you want to say I'm a regulatory market system, well, go right ahead. You've won the debate if there's regulations. Sorry, my bad. Obviously you didn't. Obviously, we came to this.
Octavian, I said 5 minutes ago that existence of regulation does not mean that something isn't a market. Yes, I completely agree to you. But on the other hand, Octavian, I'm sure you agree with me that enough regulations, even if it's not fully regulated, or fully top-down authoritarian, that at some point it's not a market anymore. You agree with me on that, right?
Sure. At some point, if you're saying that one person can donate, it wouldn't.
So we're both equally pressed with the issue, and we're both equally not going to be able to perfectly resolve when something is a market versus when something stops becoming a market. So it's not like a problem that's equally an issue for me. But the issue that I have, the reason why I'm describing this as something that's getting away from being a market, is not because you've only stipulated 1 or 2 regulations, but it's because the defense that you're giving, the rhetoric of the defense that you're giving, implies that you have more regulations than you're actually talking about. Because 10 minutes ago, when I was bringing up this issue that extends beyond just the mere age of somebody, you kind of tried to capture it all together and say, oh, well, the system can have these regulations in place that make sure that people know about all these issues if there's other reasons that they could be irrational. And it's okay, if you really mean that, you're committing yourself to other regulations where it's they have to wait.
I'm committing myself to educating the person who's donating. Yes, that is a regulation that I already committed.
Where is the education?
Prior in the debate. Prior in the debate, I already committed to making sure that you have systems in place to educate the donors. In which you said that wasn't enough.
Right, because the education that you're talking about is just education of the health considerations. But the doctor doesn't have the background or probably even the ethical, legal ability to be balancing that with the benefits that they're potentially going to be getting out of the money, or the benefits that they perceive that they're getting out of the money. So if the doctor isn't able to, so take the example with Bob. Bob hears that the doctor says that there's certain health risks to get a transplant. Maybe they're not even the worst risks in the world. But at the same time, he has other benefits for himself to weigh, which is what am I going to do with the money? What's going to be the material improvements that I get? And Bob is making a decision on those 2 factors. The doctor is not giving input on that. So when you talk about, the system has education, the education section of the system is not educating Bob on how to weigh the health risks versus the compensatory benefits that Bob is getting.
Sure, you can't have the doctor telling him, hey, these are the monetary gains, but you could have technically, if you want to make me create a regulation for it, because I was trying to make sure that I could educate those individuals to where hey, if you're going to die in 10 years, you shouldn't do it or whatever, making sure that that's the culture or whatever. But what my goal would be is to have I can't describe the specifics of it because we don't have the system. I would have to describe something in Iran, but you could have a system in place, not really, but you'd have a system in place to where you can say, hey, just because you're getting $70,000, it doesn't mean you're actually going to be gaining life or gaining stuff like that through like a top, like literally like a pamphlet, something like that, right? It might not be enough to stop it again, right? I'm not saying that like there are going to be
It's
no
really
people.
unlikely that it's going to.
It's really unlikely that if you educate somebody in the risks of an action, that they're going to commit an action that's going to harm them.
No, it's incredibly unlikely that a pamphlet is going to dissuade someone who is already interested in making an irrational decision to grab a lump sum of cash.
How do you stop somebody from making an irrational decision then, Duke?
By having a heavily regulated system like we currently have, or maybe one that is slightly more open but heavily regulated and not a market.
But it's not even.
What is regulated? You can't be paid for it.
Yeah, that's the only regulation that would technically you could have a system in which the only difference in regulation that occurs is what you get paid for it. That's the only difference today. And again, I'd like to keep stating that we're talking about a very specific small demographic, or not a small. It's not a small demographic in general, but it is a small demographic of people that would be most likely donating these organs, or selling these organs, right?
Again, so you're barely mitigating your problem, and you're introducing all of these risks to people most likely to take them.
I'm not smallly mitigating the problem. Again, there are lots of groups of people that have the ability to give their organs that have would have positive outcomes toward those who needs it, right? Again. We are specifically talking about a group of maybe 5 to 10% of those who would be able to sell their organs, and we're saying, hey, this group of people would have so many problems. We shouldn't do this system, right? Just because, for example, people would ruin their lives on marijuana doesn't mean we need to make it illegal, right? Again, just because there's a small portion of the population that would be having these organ donations, that doesn't mean that you need to have destroy the system that I'm trying to advocate for, right? If you want me to talk about how I got to the number of this would be a small portion, a small minority of people who'd be able to sell it, again, I can get there, right? But again, you're saying, oh, there's like...
No, I agree. It's going to be a very small portion. I'm 100% on board with you. And they're more likely to be alive than dead.
Yeah, but again, you're saying that like, okay, so would you agree that if 1% of those who donated organs would have a 5% worse life, but 100% of those who got the organs would have like a 1% better life, you'd obviously agree to, like, with the percentages that we gave here, that we would want to be able to have this system in place, correct?
I'm assuming
I haven't made an extreme example
of... Yeah. I mean, we need to consider like how long the life is going to continue from there. But yeah, I mean, if you set up the math, I'm forced to agree. I have no option around that, obviously.
Yeah. So like, again, I'm going to continually state that one of the major groups of people that we're going to get organs from is not this group of poor young people, but instead going to be people who are able to sell their organs, who are already on death's door, who are able to sell, give heart transplants, give kidney transplants.
Why do you think you're going to dramatically increase it? Only 0.3% of people who die are able to donate their organs, and roughly half of America's population is already registered as an organ donor. So where are you getting this gigantic increase, or even sizable increase, that's going to be benefiting lots of people's lives?
So half of America. So can you say it one more time? I'm sorry.
169 million Americans are already registered donors, and 0.3% of people who die are actually able to transplant their organ.
So again, you could. So number one, if you were going with these numbers, which I believe I was under the impression that 1/3 of Americans were organ donors, but and specifically talking about donors.
Organdonor.gov.
So organdonor.gov. Okay.
Yep.
But again, like, okay. But again, you have this half the population that is able to donate. Again, number two,
they already can donate.
So again, we're trying to get them to be incentivized to give to sell their organs, right? We're trying to make it to where, like,
throwing money at them and they make an irrational decision.
We're not. Do you think half America shouldn't sell their organs? Do you think the percentage of people who haven't already donated, don't donate because like they think that's a rational decision? Do you think all of America is making a rational decision here? To like not donate their organs?
Obviously, I'm not going to agree that everyone is making a rational decision. Obviously.
Yes. Right. So our goal is to increase the people who are getting their organs. Sorry, I'm like missing the words here. But we're trying to increase the people who are able to have organ sales for this type of stuff, right? And again,
not necessarily. The only metric should not be how many more organ donations do we have. That's a really bad metric that misses all the negative externalities that I'm talking about.
I understand. Right. So let me rephrase it. My goal is to extend the lives of people from people who are able to sell their organs or slash donate today. I'll continue to use the word donation, even though they would be selling. They would be able to donate their organs, who wouldn't do it already because of worries of irrational decision, in my opinion, of negative externalities that you're talking about that don't apply to them. Right, again, to where these negative externalities that you're talking about, of like about dying in 10 years, about dying in 5 years, they just don't apply to a lot of people, right? To be honest, most people don't have kidney failure or heart failure until very late on in life, to where they would have other failure anyways. Again, but we can get into that.
It's not, but it's not just. Remember, it's quality of life is the superior metric, not just life.
Yes,
because their quality of life is going to be hurt from other health risks.
From what? So again, we're saying that like their quality of life is going to go down because they aren't able to drink 20 drinks. So their quality of life is going to be able to go down because of these, extreme examples, right? Again, just because. I mean,
with kidneys, for example, you have a higher risk of type 2 diabetes, or whichever type is the one that you.
Yeah, you have a higher risk, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's significant enough to where we should say nobody should donate, right? Because if we think that, then we won't have a donation system, right? Again, I would like to keep saying that just because
that makes no sense.
So
why, just because if there's a high risk, that doesn't mean that makes no sense to conclude that's why how we have a donation system. If anything, it's evidence that the fact that it's so closed off exists for good reason. Because you would have an influx of people having serious health risks.
It's not such a high risk to where we stop. So it's not such a high risk to where we stop half the population from donating, right? Again, you're saying that there's all these risk factors that are included that stop these people from donating. Yet still, according to what you just said, half of America still donates, and we still consider it safe enough to where they should, right? Again, we're like saying that like, oh, there's so many negative externalities that we need to talk about, where there are way worse lives that are lived, people who donate. But again, we keep saying that people continue to donate and continue to be happy.
Who dies. Registered donations for someone who dies. That doesn't work for your point. That has nothing to do with whether or not they're going to have long-term health consequences. They're dead. Or short-term. They have nothing. They're dead. That number doesn't do anything for you.
No,
of course, lots of people are registered to be organ donors. It doesn't affect them when they're dead. That's why people do it. That's why I'm a registered organ donor.
So you said only 0.3% of people who are dead are able to sell their donations, but you also said 50% of people who die are donors. But again, that would mean that they sell donations, so they are donors.
Registered donors.
Which means they're officially able to donate, correct? They're able to donate,
it means that if you look at their license, it says they're an organ donor. So when they die, whoever's scooping up their body can potentially use their organ. And then I'm saying, of people who die, 0.3% of those organs are usable for transplant.
So you're saying 50% of people are capable of donating, but don't.
No, they do. No.
So they have donated. So 50% of people have donated, or 50% of people have the ability to be.
Do you know what it means to be a registered? I'm talking about like, do you have a driver's license?
Yes.
Are you a registered donor?
Yes.
Like, does it say it on your license?
Yes.
Okay, so are you donating an organ right now?
No, I'm not.
No,
I'm debating right now. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, true.
If I was donating my organ at Duke, I'm pretty sure that we would be in a very complex situation to where my body's in two places at once. Okay.
So when you die, possibly, like, they're allowed to take your organ if able, right? To use it for a transplant.
After death, yes, after death.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying there are 168,990,990 people like you, Octavian, in the United States.
But the thing is, I haven't donated, right? Again, my stuff while
which
I'm
is
alive,
why,
which has a significant increased ability to help people, right? It has a significant. So you're talking about this 23% after death, but again, this percentage massively increases when somebody is still alive. Right. Again, you have these people who are on the ages of 70, 80, 90, who do not know what they can do to help younger people or help people who are
then you're wrong about your prior claim that most donations would be when people die. If that's correct, then you're wrong that most of the donations will be when someone's after death. So you said that earlier. Because you wanted to get around from you wanted to get away from the irrational decision-making point by saying, well, the majority of the people are probably people who are actually going to die. But now you're saying actually in the system.
That was my answer.
Yes, sure, death's door.
Which you know what death's door means, right?
I do, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
The majority of people who are on death's door but people who are on death's door are far less likely to have an organ that is going to be a good transplant.
It's not going to. So again, they're less likely. That doesn't mean that they're at the 0.3%
significantly less likely. Someone who's on death. What? I guess I'll have to ask you. Do you know what to be on death
somebody who's
score
death
means?
score is somebody who's about to die due to like heart failure or stuff like that. Yes, I understand.
Yeah,
what
so
is, right? But again,
right. So it's very unlikely they're going to have organs that are worth donating.
Maybe I should say people who are older, specifically like in the 60s, 70s, 80s, would be more likely to donate than those who are younger, because generally people who are younger are afraid of long-term health consequences, even if you include the negative externality of, or the externality of giving money for the organs.
Great.
Right? Again,
so let's have an incredibly.
Like I said before, the person who's most likely to donate is the grandma who's trying to help their grandkids. Right? It's not the person. It's not like the parent or like the 30-year-old. It's most likely the person who's like, damn, I'm having heart failure and my kidneys are still working. I really want to donate these before I'm like going to deal with cancer or whatever. I'm sorry, I said two different things.
So
like,
okay, so then this is the perfect solution.
This is the group of people who are already most likely to donate, and also people who are most likely able to sell as well, and more likely that would go through this process, right, to be able to help more people's lives. Again,
okay,
right?
I'll agree with all of that and say here's the conclusion: don't have a market system, have an incredibly heavily regulated system that specifically allows for the sale of organ donation for that specific cohort that you're talking about, instead of having a market system that only barely benefits from the other populations that you're talking about and presents a lot of health risks for those people who are more likely to be making irrational decisions. So we can still avoid a market and have a better system.
So you're still having a
market.
So again,
for example, if the topic is just we should have a legalized market for this, there are reasonable expectations for that market, what that market is going to look like, and there are reasonable expectations for when it's no longer a market. So here would be an example that's very close to what you're talking about. We could have a new program that is worked into the Social Security Administration that says that someone who is coming up on retirement would be allowed to have a compensatory benefit for an organ transplant. This would be the exact cohort that you're talking about that fits all the best nooks and crannies of kind of the balance of health risk and the monetary benefits that they're going to get for themselves and the likelihood that they're going to be giving an organ in the first place. There's no way you would think that this is a market system still, and it would capture all of the vast majority of your benefits and avoid all of the negative externalities, or almost all the negative externalities that I'm talking about.
So are you for the sale specifically of organs in the specific demographic between the ages of 60 or whatever the demographic we stated earlier, of those who are already more likely to give their organs, but also most likely to be able to sell their organs in a positive way with limited externalities? You are for the sale in that specific group.
I think a direct cash transfer probably carries its own problems. So it depends on what we mean by sale. I think it'd be better instead of
obviously
I think a sale.
We can give other incentives outside of specifically cash transfer. If you want to talk about the other incentives we could give, then now we're talking about like the specifics of a possible incentive-based system instead of cash. Right?
I'm saying we can we can integrate it into something like Social Security Administration.
Right. So you're saying that we should have like a 70-year-old person who like has like bad lungs because they smoked when they were like 20, to like some person who's like in their 30s who had like kidney failure. No.
Right? We can do the cohort that you were talking about. I assume the cohort was something like 50 to 65 years old, something like that. It's like that kind of that most likely and best spot. So we can have a system that if someone someone who is that age, and we regulate it, so it's only someone who is that age and has very specific health criteria, is willing to donate their organ, then we give them some kind of compensatory benefit that is managed through like Social Security Administration. So maybe this means they get a specific amount of money, added on to like Social Security checks or something, for example, once they've retired. So this is very far away from a market.
So this is very it's far away from like a generalized market of like irregulation, right? We're talking about like, again, now I've gotten you to the point to where you've agreed to where there's a group of people where there's not negative externalities. Now if you look at, let's say, a group of between 55 and 40, do we now think that group of people is also giving net positives towards the sale of organs, right? To where they would also have positive outcomes, to where they would also have more positive and negative, right? Now we've gotten to the point where we can continue to move the line again and again, because I would like to say, to my knowledge, it is still net positive
this towards people
who towards people who are 40, who are like in now the 60 to 40 range, who also have net positive in the donation of organs today, who would then have the net positive sale of organs in the system that I'm advocating for, who would then also have more incentive to actually donate or well, it would be sell, who would be because I continue to want to make sure that's okay, but like be able to have their organs given to other people in a net positive way. Now we have another 20 years of people that would have a massive market for this as well, right? Which is still the case, right? So now we have between the ages of 40 and 75, we now have a 30-year gap toward people who now have the ability to sell organs towards individuals, right? We now have that massive gap of people who are able to be within this market, right? It's not like there are zero people who are able to sell organs here now. We're not in this point in place where we're like, okay, this is a market system. It actually does have the positives of the market, right? It has the positives that we want from it. It has the incentives. It has the incentive structure that you were talking about earlier, right?
The positives of the market, and then the part you're leaving out is, and the positives of regulation. So it's hardly even a market anymore. So when we're talking about, if the topic is just legalize the sale of organs, we're going to have a reasonable expectation of what the legalization of a sale of something looks like. If I tell you anything else is legalized for sale, you're not expecting it to be a specific cohort like that. You're expecting something like either 18, 21, or 25 at the most is going to be as far as the regulation extends. 25 itself is even itself incredibly rare.
Just because we're operating within a different structure doesn't mean that it is now like not a market system, right? Again, like just because I'm saying that we have now agreed that
it's not per se about, this is really important, sorry, it's not per se about what makes a market, it's more per se about what the topic sentence entails of the legalization of sale, the legalization of sale, like what we expect from that. For example, there's a reason why I haven't gone for like a stupid straw man version of your position, which is, oh, wouldn't it be really bad if like mom and pop stores got to market organ sales and like offer $100,000 for it? That's like stupid. You're like, okay, that's a crazy market. I'm not going to support something like that. And I could be like, oh, but do you know what the definition of a market is? Like, I'm not, that'd be a really dumb approach, right? Wouldn't it? So we need to have like a reasonable expectation of what this looks like. And I think just, I mean, there's no, like, I think we agree there's no objective answer, like perfectly what makes a market.
We would literally have to both research this for probably 10, 15 years.
And we're probably never going to
right? Because
maybe Auntie has, maybe Auntie has some like nerd ass definition of what a market is, but we at least have like an eye test or a gut test or whatever for what a market is. And I think I would wager whatever the sale is of my kidney that most people, if they are presented with your description, are not going to think, oh yeah, that's a market. They're going to think that is like a very specific program designed to maximize some benefits and get rid of some harms. So I totally agree. The current system is not perfect, but the legalization of sales of organs, just as like that, as is not a system that's going to be preferable overall.
Like, so again, I would actually disagree. Like, just because like you're using incentive structures that are, you know, not necessarily cash based, just because you're not using incentive structures through the entire population doesn't mean you haven't legalized the sale of organs. Right? You have. That is literally what we've done. We've now created a system in place where we both agree, hey, we think there are positive incentives here for a market-based solution to save more people's lives who are younger, who need the donations, which I recommend to the entire audience. If you can donate, you should try to donate. And if you have positive outcomes, you should. And I think Duke would agree with me on this. But like, if you have, you know, this group of people who we now have like 35 years, again, that I've stated before, people who are able to sell their organs. And we, again, if we're able to find out through like regulatory practices, now we can go down to 30 to where we now have still more positive outcomes than negative. Again, right? Now you have, you know, a system in place where
I think when you're going that 30, far, right? you're producing far too many negative externalities that I talked about.
Right. What do you think? Do you think like somebody who's like 35 is not going to be able to like look at the rational and irrational ability to donate organs and like not be able to look at the long-term outcomes?
When they're presented with a lump sum and it's like an average American who has like very little in their savings, for example, and they have maybe they're finishing student loans, they have a large mortgage that they're paying for now, maybe now they have children that they pay for as well, and you're putting it in front of them a huge lump sum of cash. Yeah, I think people act very irrationally when confronted with lump sums.
So what if, okay, let me try to switch it to where it would be more of your system, unless I want to see if you would agree with that. So let's say we had a system in which we did the Social Security benefits to where you would get higher amounts of Social Security benefits if you donated organs prior to being within Social Security, or if you're within Social Security, right? Let's say that was the case. Now you don't have this
anymore, right?
Well, it would be like, just because you aren't giving lump sum doesn't mean you aren't selling something, right?
Well, but if you're funneling it like through the SSA, this is not sale anymore.
It is.
Like we're really
like,
stretching these words though. Like there's a way to define it, but you're really stretching it. Like when we think of the words market and the word sale, we are not thinking of things like, oh yeah, it's going to be worked into your Social Security benefits over time from the government. That's not what we're thinking of when we hear those words.
Sure, that's not what we're. Sure, I guess that's not what we're thinking of when we hear these words. I'm trying to, like I'm trying to get within your structure to make sure that we can solve the problem. And I'm going to try and expand it, right? Again, so would you be fine with the system in place where people above the age of 25 would be able to sell their organs, be able to increase their Social Security?
No, that's far too young because of the issues I talked about. Yeah.
Okay, so what age do you think that would be appropriate? Would you say 35 again?
I mean, I'll give the annoying preface at first, which is like we would want to have like maybe some research on this to try to figure out a better answer. But yeah. But I mean, ballparking it, I think something like 40 to 60 is going to be a pretty good range.
Okay, so let's say, obviously I'm not going to go to 60, but like let's say 40 to 75 year olds now are able to like sell their organs in either a SSA system or incentive-based system, right? I mean, maybe we've stretched the term of sale, right? But again, now we have a system in place where you're incentivized to, like with a monetary compensation over time, to be able to give your organs to another person, right? Which I would say is a product for a product, right? You might not have like this.
Yeah, you can take the exact like definitions of these words and then say it fits. Like for example, like I hope you would agree this gets a little bit ludicrous, right?
Do you think buying a car with a car loan is like not buying something?
No, but I think if you just take the definitions literally, you're going to get to some pretty absurd cases. For example, if we really took this like as seriously just on these definitions, then like you would be allowed to defend a system that only gives money to people who are 51 years old and they have a clean bill of health. Because under your definition, that would be, well, the government legalize an instance where money is being given out for someone's organ. But I don't think you would consider that like fair grounds for your side of the debate.
Could you describe what that system would? What do you mean by that? Do you mean like it might?
Yeah,
like I don't know.
Let's say the government found. Come on, you don't seriously think that it would be fair ground in the conversation if you were defending a system where the requirements were you have to be 51 to 51 years old, you have to have a clean bill of health, you have to have perfect organs, and then and you have to have, I don't know, you have to be middle class as well to make sure we avoid any of the issues of. Or lessen the issues of irrationality. Are you really going to say, yep, if that system is better, then I've supported the legalization of the sale of organs?
No, not necessarily the sentence, but I would say that there would be technically a small market of people trying to sell their organs, right? So again, like you could say that like there's like technically a market for people who buy like jewelry on TV, but again, just because that market is like only basically de facto only available to those above the age of 55, doesn't mean that it isn't a market, right?
I think this is analogous to asking like if when did the legalization, or like if you ask at different time spots in America in the last 20 years, like is there a legalization of the sale of marijuana? I don't think just because like a couple areas of the United States or a couple states had just started to do that we would affirm the statement that it's true that there's a legalization of sale of marijuana. And if we were trying to say, yes, we should legalize the sale of marijuana, I think it'd be pretty hard pressed to find somebody who says, oh, I just think like these municipalities should be able to do it under these contexts, under these really strict age ranges, under these specific health conditions. We're not really
the legalization of drugs is in. Do you think the Netherlands is the legalization of drugs? Because I would make that statement.
I don't know enough about the Netherlands to say.
I would make that statement, even though the legalization of drugs is only in the red light district. But I would make the statement that the Netherlands has the legalization of drugs.
Wait, so it's only legal to sell in the red light district of the Netherlands?
It's only legal. Because
then I would say no. I would say if someone asked me, I'd say no. It's legal in a part of the Netherlands. This is now we come to the case where we both agree to where the partial legalization of the sale of of course.
Yeah. Like, but the question is now, like, is literally the crux of this debate the definition of sale? The definition of a market?
I mean, in some respects, like in the background of a topic like this, that has to be part of the conversation.
I mean,
right?
I guess, right?
It's
again,
kind
like,
of insane to take
if we're saying that like
yeah.
in the age of 40 to 75 years old, we have now a market in which we incentivize those through payment processing systems to be able to sell their organs. I would say that's a market to be able to sell your organs between the ages of 70 to 75, or not 75, 40 to 75. Right? It might not be a market for everybody, like, and it might not be like
I think
the perfect sale of organs.
Yeah.
But again, like,
you've clearly created a market, just to be clear, because I feel like Anti's going to chew me out for this. And I don't think, just to be clear, that is a market that you've created, obviously. But if we're just talking about the legalization, sorry, I didn't mean to imply otherwise.
That there isn't a market. I was like,
I think the issue is when I'm talking about a market in the context of what the sentence, the legalization of the sale of organ entails, which entails a market that is much broader and much looser than that. So, like, as an obvious example, if I asked you in, like, I don't know when Colorado legalized weed, but I'm just gonna guess 2012. Let's say I asked you in 2013, once they've set up the shops, and I say, is there a market for, like, is there a legal market for the sale of marijuana in the United States of America? Now, you might flippantly say yes, but the more careful answer to that is going to be, and a meaningfully careful answer, it's going to be, no, you need to go to Colorado if you want the market.
The meaningful answer would be yes, but it's only in Colorado. That would be the meaningful answer, right? Because if there's a market that's part of a system, or if there's legal sale in part of the system, we would say there's legal sale in the system, just only in a part of it.
So,
right?
Just to get absurd very quickly, let's say the government legalize that marijuana can only be sold in Octavian's dorm or house, whatever, and the only people who can buy it are people who live next door.
You already know my answer, and you're gonna hate it. Like, yeah. I would say, like, yes,
there might be there's a market.
Like, there's like a semantical difference now we're getting at there, but like,
are you going to agree? Because here's an easy way to prove it. Like, if I was like, okay, I guess we don't need to, or like, we've already legalized the sale of marijuana in the United States. You'd be like, well, hold on, no, we haven't. We've done one very, very small thing that we've opened up a market to.
No, so what we've done is we need to expand the ability for those who need access to marijuana to be able to buy it. Because obviously, if I'm only selling it in my dorm, that's the only way you can get it legally. That's actually impossible to be able to buy it. To be honest, it's pretty impossible to get to my dorm. So I don't know. I feel like that would be almost impossible to get the weed. To be honest, it's like actually saying, if you could only buy weed on planes, like, is there a market for it? I would say, yeah, you technically can buy marijuana in America, just only you do it on planes, right? But like, again, I don't want to like get like.
But we wouldn't say there's a legalization of sale.
I would say that there's a legalization of sale on planes. Obviously, everyone would say that statement, exactly. Right? We would all make that statement, right? We would make it with conditions, right? That's what I'm like saying. We've kind of moved to where, again,
it's like
we create a system in which
I agree. Don't want to
like. We're going in a circle. I feel like we've gone in circles for the past 15 minutes. I'm going to be honest.
Okay, again, let me try to put this statement forward, and then maybe you can agree with it. We're obviously doing semantics at this point as to like what counts as that the meaning of that sentence, and well, we agree on what a market is, but there's like big market, little market.
What is the sale? What would it mean if you mean you can buy and sell? Yeah.
I don't know, does this place hate coming to agreements between the debaters or not? If they don't, then I'm going to propose an agreement.
Well, we're going to wrap soon any which way. So, would you like? And then we are going to have the questions from the judges.
Okay, I'll propose an agreement then. And maybe and by the you agreeing doesn't mean you think this is the optimal system by any means. Just the one that you would agree to, I guess. I'll agree that it would be better to have a system different from what we have right now that is something like ages 40 to 60, 65, that allows for certain people with really good health conditions to sell their organs at like a quote unquote fair market price or whatever. But the way in which they're getting compensated for that is not in a lump sum payment, but is integrated into something like the Social Security Administration or some other system. And then I'm going to tack onto that, and you can separate these if you want, I guess. But I'm going to tack onto that, hoping you'll agree to everything. That proposal right there is not really what people expect when they say the legalization of the sale of organs.
I would agree that's a better system, and I would agree that I would be for that system over the system we have today. I wouldn't say I would be necessarily for that system as the optimal system, but I would also disagree that people would say, you know, just because you can only sell when you're above 40, or just because, you know, you could sell, you know, in a certain age ranges, that would not make, it would obviously make a market. And B, I think that people would say, yeah, you can. Just have to wait till you're 40. You know, you just have to wait till you're 25. You know, I might be a bit different in how we do it today, but I would totally disagree with the last statement, and I would say that the first statement is a better system. But maybe I wouldn't say that it's the best, because I would say we both agree that it wouldn't be the best, because we don't know what the best is, because we don't study it, and we don't have a system to be able to even analyze it.
Sure.
But Prime, you said you had some questions.
Yep. All right. So, first question: if legalized, would fat transplants and skin transplants be covered for simple cosmetic surgery, and would this be objectionable? Toyola, who is this to? Just
The first part of it is to Octavian, and then based on his response, the second part would be
Okay.
Duke.
Could you say the same one more time? I'm sorry. I'm trying to.
Sure.
It's
So,
skin
like,
transplants. And...
If we had like a legalized private sale of organs and stuff, would you be able to do skin, and would you be able to do fat? Kind of fat's not an organ, right? But like,
yeah, I would say that
skin.
I don't think I would be fine with that. I don't even know if that's illegal today, to be honest. I'm not really 100% sure what the person's trying to get to, but I would obviously be for that if you have a little. So let's say, for example, because I specifically don't know how skin or fat operations work, and whether
well,
or
let's
not
say
they're,
you lost a ton of weight, right? And you just have
Yeah.
like all that skin, and then you meet a burn victim, and they need a skin graft, right?
Oh yeah, obviously I would be for the sale of your skin there. I think that would be extremely positive, because both of you, one, and I think Duke would actually agree with me here. One, that specific case is an extremely positive case for this type of system, where you need to, not need to, but you probably would need a surgery in place to be able to get rid of skin. And two, it'd be positive for you to get paid for, or have that operation paid for, right? To where it would be positive. I think
And
fat,
then it would be like if you had a lot of fat,
Yeah.
and then you met someone with I guess on the funny side, you could say with no ass, right?
Yeah.
You could just create a market.
Yeah,
And
I guess
it doesn't seem to be dangerous, but if Duke has any objections, that would be the part of the questions for him.
Yeah, I don't know if Duke would have any exceptions to that. Especially, I think Duke and I would get into the same argument again, where if people start selling too much of their skin, would there be regulations to be able to stop it? I think it'd be the same.
Yeah, it's hard to know. I would also say skin is not something I've thought too much about in terms of an organ transplant. But if the skin is used for making people quote unquote thick, I'd be against it. That's a degeneracy of our culture.
okay. But skin transplants are a thing that they do. At least they're working on.
Well, yeah, but
I know-
don't if they do the private for sale version of it, right?
Yeah, that would be interesting, right? Oh,
Sell your skin. I think
Here's
that's
here's a question that neither of you'll be able to answer, right? If you got a full skin transplant, would a white person be black?
I'm not answering
Answer is
this.
no.
This is a troll question. This is a troll question. How does my answer to this question?
Identification is all that's required. Presentation is
answer
not
it.
necessary.
I'll
Um,
answer
Right,
it
to
seriously
anybody?
if you want.
This
Yeah.
is such a.
Answer the question.
Well, I have an
think-
answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Transracialism is wrong and gross. The answer to this would be no. The answer
You're gonna get Auntie's
to
wrath now.
we've talked about it before. We actually mostly agree, to my understanding. Ironically, it's a little bit of a semantics thing again. But it's the material history of who a person is and what their lineage is that defines if they're black or not the color of their skin.
Well, we could say that black necessarily defines as both the color of your skin and the historical race as well. We use that in tandem, right?
Well, no, we don't, to be right, because they're albino black people.
Sure, but we also say that those people like necessarily don't face the same colorism as like people who present black as well, right?
Sure, but
Like,
all that means is some black people, and this is already true of non-albino black people. Some black people face more colorism than other black people.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't have a stake in translationalism because I haven't done any research in
The
translation.
defining topic of our century, Octavian.
True. Well, I actually disagree. I think climate change is, but
Okay.
That's a beta answer.
it's a correct answer, so get screwed.
All right. Thanks for that. Interesting answers. All right. So a person asked, can Octavian bullet point for us what implementations would be in place to ensure the organ harvest was legal?
So are they asking for what regulations I would be in favor of right now to make sure that would be...
Yeah. What would it look like?
So I guess I would be for number one, I'd be making sure there's an age limit on it. Depending on research, obviously, I would agree with whatever research states the age limit is on. Number two, I'd make sure there's a system in place of regulatory bodies on a national and state-based level, mostly national, I would say, because most times it seems like they're better regulation, to where you inform individuals when they go for the process through educational means on both the monetary, health, and other benefits that are possible, whatever way we could, to make sure there's maximum information that they could get, as much as they can, to be honest. And then I would make sure that we have the expertise and ability to do it, right? To make sure that we have the people who are able to do these surgeries and processes would be, number one, qualified. Number two, would have the monetary abilities to help these people, right? And I guess that would be the things that I can think about off the top of my head. If I was like offered a regulation that seems to be reasonable to me, obviously I would add it. If it seems like there's some negative externality, as I talked with Duke, we talked about different regulations that could be possible. I think those are the three main ones I think have to be there without question, or else the system would necessarily fail. So, yeah, that's.
Next, are the organs going to have serial numbers on them or a barcode? How will we catalog organs?
I think the judges are trolling. I think you'd be able to catalog organs mostly through dog tags. No, I'm joking. Mostly through tag-based system. You'd be able to do it however we do it already. There's already a catalog.
Yeah, that seems like something you don't have to cover.
You don't have to. There's already a system in place for the donation of organs, like whose organs where and stuff like that. So it seems like it's already done today. I feel like it could be done the same way.
So this one's for Duke. Should people be allowed to sell their blood? And if yes, can you name the trait that's true of blood, which, if true of organs, would enable people to consensually sell their organs as well?
Can I name the trait what? One more time?
Should people be allowed to sell their blood? And if yes, can you name the trait that's true of blood, which, if true of organs, would enable people to consensually sell their organs?
This question seems, unless I don't understand it, it seems like just already asking the wrong question. Why would there need to be a trait of blood that's true of organs?
Well, I think it's, do you think that people should be able to sell their own blood first?
Yeah, the first answer to that is yeah, blood donation's fine, yeah.
Okay, and then I believe it breaks down to what's different between selling your own blood and not selling your own organs.
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah, the name the trait way was weird because I don't know if there's a trait that they necessarily share, but the distinction that matters is just that there's much higher risks that come along with it, primarily due to the size of the monetary compensation that you're going to get. So I guess the trait is the fiscal difference.
So if you got paid, let's say you're in a system in which you got paid like $5,000 for your organ instead, would you be fine with that system?
I'm going to agree that
there a massive financial, like if the system in place where like organs aren't as necessary anymore, and you don't have a system in place where you're paid but you're not paid that much for organs, but there's still a market and a donation system, or would you be fine with that?
The market's getting pretty skewed at this point. If we have a cap on the amount of money that can be offered.
It's not a cap, but let's say the market is in the place to where it's only.
Oh, if it actually was lower?
Like the market. Let's say the market was pretty low, in the amount of cost for it, right? Let's say we're in the system in place where.
Yeah, I might be more likely to agree to it. Yeah. Yep. I might be more likely to agree to it. Yeah, a large part of the issue is the money that somebody gets for it.
Okay.
So we'll do closing statements as we're getting our votes in. All right. Well, yeah. Sorry. Before we do the closing statements, we're gonna get our votes in, and I'll say to the audience, hey guys, if you enjoyed this content, hit that follow button. Make sure notifications are on. We do 7 nights a week. We always have content for you, either here or on YouTube. So check us out. We got our social media as Experts Social and Chat. For our social media, check us out there on Twitter, Discord, and YouTube. If you missed any part of this, check out our YouTube. Like, comment, subscribe. Consider becoming a YouTube member, helping us that way by hitting that join button. Also, consider subbing to this channel. Sub to the channel, give bits or give subs to keep this channel powered. If you like having this entertainment week after week, day after day, then be so kind, help us out by helping out this community. If you got Amazon Prime /Prime Gaming, use that sub on the channel. You'll get our emotes, you'll get ad-free viewing, you'll get all that good stuff, and you'll be keeping this up around so we can keep doing this and providing you this content. All right. So yeah, you guys can give your closing statements.
Do you want me to go first, Duke, or do you want to go first?
You got it.
All right. So it seems like today we came here to discuss whether or not the legalization of selling organs would be possible and positive in a system we have today. It seems like Duke came here with multiple different reasons why not. It seems like we kind of came to the point in which he thinks that the system in which I would advocate for, either A, would have a problem of the amount of money given for organs, or B, would have the problem of the regulation in place for the system. It seems like if we just should the system a bit, the Duke would already be for the system, right? If the sale of organs, for example, with like livers was like only $10,000, Duke would already be fine with it, right? If there were certain organs that only had a certain monetary gain for sale, he would already be fine with it, as we learned with the last question. He would also be fine with it if there was a certain age range in which you would do it, as we stated during the long points in the conversation, to where he would be fine with the ages of, like say, 40 to 65, for example, as an age we gave out. He would be fine with it as well, right? So it seems like there's a lot of places in which we can have this market system, maybe not as the full extent of sale of all organs or sale of every organ for a specific purpose to everybody, right? Which Duke already knows I disagree with, right? But again, it seems like we have the ability to have the system in place, right? Where we can sell organs, at least certain organs. Duke already agrees with that. He thinks we can already do it in certain age ranges for almost all organs, right? And he already agrees with a lot of other, right? That we would say that would make a market for organs. The only thing he disagrees with is whether or not the definition of sale of organs was met by the conditions and system I made up. And that seems to be the only disagreement.
Okay. So go ahead, Duke.
Duke can give this.
Okay, so I think that the debate, sadly, not sadly, however you want to dice it up, does have to confront an important question as to what do we actually mean by the words that we gave at the start. Oftentimes, this is dumb semantics. In this case, it's actually meaningful. When we're having these kinds of conversations, think of any other conversation that has similar words in place: the legalization of marijuana, legalization of vape pens, the legalization of prostitution, so on and so forth. We come to the table with reasonable expectations as to what we're actually talking about in those cases. Everybody here agrees, not just Octavian, but almost certainly everybody listening, that there's a reasonable expectation that we're talking about the legalization of sale of X, Y, or Z, as long as it's not something that's entirely innocuous. It has something like, children aren't allowed to participate in this. But beyond that, when we talk about the sale of something, we expect it to be something that is quite open. In this context, while Octavian has tried to make it look like I have agreed to everything in his position, I think the more proper analysis of what's happened in the conversation is that Octavian isn't defending the legalization of sale of organs. Rather, he is defending a very specific, very heavily regulated, very carefully contoured method of improving the current system that we have. But I don't think that's something that should lead you to the conclusion that the legalization of the sale of organs is good. The biggest reason why, which I don't think Octavian ever had a satisfying response to, was that you're going to introduce lots of irrational decision-making into the average person when they're confronted with a lump sum of cash. And when you introduce this into the system, for the vast majority of people that are now being added into the amount of organ donations, you're going to be producing lots of negative health consequences and financial consequences for those who choose to opt into the system, with a very small benefit to the amount of people who are going to get some amount of organ transplant with a few more lives added, a few more years added onto the life at best.
Okay. Thanks so much. All right. The votes are in, and with unanimous support, Octavian, you win this round. Great for you. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. I'd like to thank Duke for the last minute representation and understanding the argument. I think Duke and I agree on a lot. I think a lot of times we will disagree on very small minutia, and it seems like we went there again today. But I just think that if we're gonna, I just think that I'm very happy to get to the finals. I'm very happy to keep going. Like I said, I respect Duke for that, and that's all I'll say. I'm not going to continue the conversation for another hour. Duke and I can talk about it on our own time and yell at each other for another 5 hours if we need to. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say.
Big congratulations getting to the final. We have Octavian versus J-Boz for $1,200 next week.
Yeah, next week. Our Duke. First of all, thank you for coming in and helping us out when the other person dropped out. Duke, can you give us any final thoughts you have, or where people can find you?
Final thoughts. Octavian is a cool person. Made some good points. How nice. And if you want to watch someone debate a Twitch thought for 4 minutes on whether or not infanticide should be legal, then you can go to Duke Debates on YouTube. Duke Debates on YouTube. Pretty fun time.
It sounds amazing. Okay.
Oh my god.
And oh boy.
God
Then
damn it, Duke. I knew you were gonna do that.
And is there a place we can find you, Octavian?
Yeah, you can find me either on Destiny.gg. I'll be debating there a lot, and then find me on Octavian821 on all platforms, and then Octavian821, and then that's it. I'm good, and I'll be here hopefully whenever we have the finals. Good luck to J-Boss, I guess, to face against somebody who is still undefeated, myself, and I think I'll have a run for his money. So
A literal run for his money.
yeah, literal.
Okay.
Well,
Next,
I mean, I think it's my money, but
Toyola, do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, as usual, if you're interested in this, or if you hate this and you want to challenge me on how this can be better, or if you want to be a part of the next one, or if you want to do cool projects with us, or meet cool people, or just come yell at people in my Discord, I'm Toyolo. I make things happen. We do cool shit, and it's the House of Toy on Discord, and Toyolo11777. It's a totally normal Twitch username, and you can find me on Twitter at Toyolo_.
Post the link in
Toyolo.
Twitch chat so that people can find it. Why do people think people are going to search? No one's going to search for you, right, guys? For self promotion, no one's going to search for you. Post
You follow me.
the link.
I got to you somehow, Prime.
You gave me the link. I wasn't going to look for it.
I never gave you my links.
Yeah.
I never gave you the links.
Okay.
I wouldn't even know how.
All right. Anyway, the links are in chat. He apparently figured it out. So everyone, thank you for coming through. Thanks to our kind debaters. We will be back tomorrow with every roundtable. As always, we always have more content for you. Hit that follow button. Haven't done so yet. Someone just did. Oh, Duke. Thanks, Duke, for giving us a follow. All right. We will see you tomorrow, 8 p.m.